You are not going to make it if you just ran away. But we're going to talk about it through the lens of the Iran war, through the lens of Donald Trump's Kobayashi Maru. And we're not just going to talk about Bitcoin. We're going to talk about power projection and how the rules of the system itself are being redefined during all of this. So it should be pretty fun. Before I bring my guest on, I'm going to, and then after that, we're going to talk about this for a couple hours. And then I'll hang out with you guys a little bit, do some rants, do some boosts. So if you have anything you want to send a rant over. We'll obviously get to that later on. Otherwise, if you're watching on replay, as always, send over a boost. I've got a few boosts from last week's show. Appreciate that. I know people had fun with that one. So we will get to those as well in the toward the end of the show. But before then, I did want to thank our main show sponsor tonight, and that is longtime friends over at Love Litters. Tired of heavy, dusty, smelly cat litter that tracks everywhere and fills your house with odor? Discover Love Litters, the long-lasting wood-based litter made from pure kiln-dried wood with no chemicals or additives. It's eco-friendly, repurposing wood that would otherwise go to the landfill. Here's why it's so great. It completely neutralizes cat urine odor. You just scoop the solids daily, flush them, and the urine simply evaporates with zero smell. A single 45-pound box can last one cat 6 to 9 months. When used at about an inch deep, turns into a fine sawdust over time, so there's minimal tracking and less mess to clean. If you have birds, Love Litters is aggressively absorbent, and customers who switch from clay say they'll never go back, loving the fresh pine scent, ease of use, and how clean their homes stay. If you're ready to kick the clay habit for good, head to badlandsmedia.tv/litter for free shipping and try Love Litters. Your pets and your nose will thank you. That's badlandsmedia.tv/litter. And now I am actually a user of this stuff, and it does make a massive difference. And I was on the anti-regular cat litter train before I knew about Love Litters, but their stuff is great. I was using walnut litter before this. Makes a huge difference. Then when you go into somebody's house who uses regular cat litter, it just smells like chemicals and is a total disaster. So support our friends, they support us, and otherwise, I suppose it is time to bring on GMoney and scare everybody. So how's it going, man?
What up, Burning Bright? Love you, true. I like to do. And you were a cat guy, but you have a cat, but you also have a wolf. So I'm gonna let you slide with that. If you just had a cat, it'd be kind of a problem. But your wolf it way offsets the cat, so
yeah,
you're good.
I agree. Cats are odd. They're weird. They're weird creatures. But I feel like if you're on some sort of spectrum, you can identify with cats also definitely being on a spectrum. But I am also a wolf guy. So I've got the autistic animal, but then I also have the power projection animal, and yeah, it does balance things out.
You have a very undomesticated animal in some sense of the word as well,
that's true.
Is interesting.
Yeah,
right.
So every time people ask me like how well trained is the wolf, and I'm like, well, not the best, but these days I used to feel self-conscious about that, but now I feel good about it. I'm like, he's such a savage, I couldn't train him. And
and it's kind of funny, right? Because people don't really understand that dogs came from wolves just over certain millennia, right? We've domesticated them and they come out like these little fluffy wiener dogs or whatever, right? So it's hilarious how we don't think in those terms, but absolutely that's what's happened. So no, this is gonna be a great episode. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Actually, that if we stick on the wolf aside, I have said that my dog, he's 6 years old now. I did more first principles thinking through raising him than like anything else before getting into the InfoWars stuff. And a big part of that was because he was so sick for the first year of his life eating dog food and kibble. And I was going to all these vets trying to figure out like, what the fuck is wrong with this dog? Can't figure it out. He was like 75 pounds and they said he should have been over 100. And I kept looking into raw meat. I was like, well, what if I try raw diet? Everyone's telling me like feed him raw meat when I go online. And my vet, I'll never forget, my wife was there, said, would you eat raw meat? When I said, like, why shouldn't I feed? I said, well, I also wouldn't eat dog food. So that convinced me, because I didn't want to trust the system anymore. I bought him raw meat with ground bone in it. gave it to him, and he was cured overnight. Literally overnight. In 1 month, at a year and a half years old, he gained like 25 pounds of muscle and is like a lean machine. Anytime a vet sees him or anything like that, they're like, wow, what a specimen. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's because I didn't listen to any of you motherfuckers. It's a funny aside, but it's really a lesson of just like, sometimes you have to reject the system entirely and just do what makes sense intuitively. My dog looks like a wolf. I thought maybe eating meat would be better for him than eating kibble. And it turns out
that's a great intro to the foundation of this, right? Because we have to understand that we live in an engineered system that is unbound to natural law, and that all of the things that we think we respect in the institutions, right? The different certificates and licenses from professionals. I hate to break it to people, it's all bullshit, okay? Because our system inherently is one where we get to pick the winners. It's not based on capitalism. And so that's what we kind of want to go here with, is that we've never had a capitalistic system. The winners and losers that we have today are because we chose them, not because they won out in some competition. I mean, there is a little bit of that in there, but primarily these are engineered systems of control. And so you're absolutely right. When stuff gets too far from natural law, this is what happens, right? You get this engineered food that makes alpha wolf sick because it's not in their repertoire to be eating that stuff, just like us.
Yeah. And to the point, you deal with this all the time. We all kind of deal with this when even a lot of the people watching the show, when you've tried to quote unquote red pill people, for you, it's orange pilling people, whatever kind of rabbit hole you're trying to get people down into, there's all this calcification and domestication, you might call it, that you're trying to break through. And that example of the dog was just, it was eye-opening to me, where I'm like, that vet actually with a straight face said that and didn't even realize, he didn't even seem to think like, dude, this doesn't even make any sense. Even if raw diet was the wrong move for me, telling me that it's the wrong move for my dog because humans don't eat it was so crazy. And, to transition into, we're going to get obviously into power projection and everything, but I think it'd be fun to start right now. The Iran war, whatever we think is real or not, I just want to show people, I want to apologize to anybody I've given the impression, if I've given the impression that I have not taken this war seriously enough, I just want to show the most recent developments. Both CNN and Fox News are confirming that there could have been plans to deploy bomb-strapped dolphins in the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if you saw this story, but it was a real story that CNN circulated and then Fox News picked up. So that kind of starts us with Iran. But while I've been talking about and writing about the Iran war for 2 months now, and about global trade and all that kind of stuff, I think the aspect of it that maybe some people are just starting to talk about has really been the stuff we've been talking about the whole time, in private chats and everything, or in Badlands, which is, it looks like the whole system, the global system, is kind of on public stage right now. Whatever we think is or isn't going on with Trump and Iran. And just on a broad strokes, I wonder what you think of it in terms of, like, you talk to a lot of people who are not necessarily truthers, they're Bitcoin maximalists, but they're really well versed on like global trade and finance. And I wonder if you think they're starting to look at the situation and think there's something bigger going on to this stuff.
Yeah, look, I like to take it back to kind of where this all started in my perspective. This kind of started for me was when Iran tried to nationalize their oil, okay? Because back in the day, the grifters of, Mossad, City of London, whoever they were using the Iran oil trade to grift off of their country, right? They were stealing, they were money changers essentially for oil, okay? And so actually the Iranian oil trade built the English Navy, funny enough, right? All the money that was made from that. Right. And so they couldn't allow that cash cow to be let go. So of course they caused a coup, right? And they let the psycho Khomeini get in, which was really, fundamental, Islam, which is, crazy Islam, gave power back to the fundamental Islamicists, gave power back to a small group of people. And essentially Iran's been controlled by CIA, Mossad, City of London for the last 50 years, right? Take it or leave it. And so when you understand it, from that perspective. And you're like, well, wait a minute, like this isn't something new. This is something that actually goes back decades. So how do we fix a problem that's been so jacked up for so long? These people have been oppressed for so long. It's going to take some shakeup of that system to clear it, right? And that's why I think even in today's news, you see that Trump is going to basically escort security for certain vessels going through. So like the Mossad City of London stuff, you guys are getting absolutely shaken down, right? Your money flow has been cut off. And you're going to feel the pain, I think, is really kind of what's happening here. But I don't really think the Bitcoin maxis are still getting it. So I don't believe that they're getting it. They still think Trump was about to wipe an entire race of people off the planet on Easter. And so, they still attack him for promoting his shit coins. But this is a PSY war. Yeah. This is an information war. We are compartmentalized for a reason, and I've always said, you're not going to see the beauty of Trump's retardedness until the end, right? Like everything looks retarded from the beginning, and we don't even know what that beauty is going to look like at the end. But trust me, like you're getting a rug pull for the people that don't think Trump has a master plan for this, and that's just kind of the terms I like to put it. I don't like to get too emotional about it.
Yeah, that I think is a good lead in, because in a funny way, I totally agree with that. I mean, I've definitely come to believe that the awakening is going to be much more of a segmented choice by choice thing. You've always said you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. One of the things I've said in writing is kind of morphing that and saying you get the awakening on the timeline, you deserve it. And some people never deserve it, so they never get it, right? They're going to be in a new world, but that doesn't mean everybody's equal in that world or everybody's understanding is the same on the way to that world. But what's funny, I totally agree in terms of how Trump looks right now to a lot of normies, and honestly, even a lot of MAGA people that are like, what the hell is going on? Chris likes talking about the discombobulator, and Trump keeps using that terminology. And of course, we all have our disagreements of like what's really going on in Iran, what's really going on in Venezuela and all that. I've written a lot about what I think is going on in those places. But I think the cool thing about the current Trump is a madman storyline is it brings me to why I named this episode American Power. Because before we even get down the rabbit hole of what we think that means and where American Power is going, I think the cool thing about the madman Donald Trump storyline in 2026 is that even the normies you're talking about, or even like Bitcoin maxis who think Trump is a madman retard, they're all kind of agreeing on a central point, and that is that power, I've been saying for years, the power is power paradigm. Like the only way to enforce any kind of rules on a system, whether that they're good or bad, is through power, right? And the funny thing about what Trump is doing right now with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz and blockades of blockades and all that is he's kind of forcing like globalists, Americans, MAGA people, liberals, all are basically coming to the table and saying, hey, we might think it's insane, but like he's the most powerful man in the world with the most powerful country in the world. And I think the whole battle space is just being forced to reconcile that, of being like, and I don't think he minds that. Like, I really think there's a lesson there where, I don't know, if you take Canada, for example, Canada putting out press releases about what they think Trump should be doing, they're being laughed at because nobody gives a fuck. Germany's being laughed at. Europe is being laughed at. And I mean that even if you think Trump is a madman, it's like, well, at what point do these different pockets of people who hate Trump and think he's crazy start to go, well, then maybe we should have more ways to put these people in check. Maybe we shouldn't have, governments that can do this kind of thing. I just wonder if you think there's any of that method to the madness with some of the stuff he does.
No, absolutely. I mean, Trump is breaking up the old good boys club, right? Because before, like we're going to go into Iraq and we're going to go into Afghanistan. We're going to stay there 18 years and we're going to play these little games and let the military industrial complex just make trillions of dollars and, have all these people die. And like, it's really sad when you look back and realize that these wars, these never ending wars, are really just money laundering to, funnel money to NGOs through death and destruction. Because you look at the timelines of these things, right? Trump Trump solved the Venezuela issue in one night. you know, now the Ukraine thing's been going on for a while, but I think there's something deeper there, obviously. And so, I think, it's really showcasing how real power trumps everything, and that we've never really used it because we've been hamstrung by the financial system and the incentives to stay longer, not finish the job because it's not financially in the best interest of the NGOs that provide the weapons or provide the infrastructure or provide whatever, right, for these conflicts to continue. And so, Trump is showing the world what real power is. He's taking out the bad people, quote unquote. And I think he's bringing them all to, to pay for what they've done for a long time.
Yeah. And that's where that's what I mean, that I think there's kind of a funny brilliance where it's the rare situation where the people that hate Trump the most and the people that love him the most are almost agreeing on that power paradigm that you're talking about, right? Like people like us that think there's a bigger plan going on and do think that Trump knows what the fuck he's doing are being like, yeah, power is power, bitch. This is how it works. We're breaking up, as you said, like the boys club. We're breaking up the technical term for it might be the rules-based international order. Like that's over. We're breaking that, and Trump is breaking it. So if you're us, you think that that's amazing and something that we've been projecting from our various directions for years. But the funny thing is, if you don't think that's a good thing, he's still winning the argument, right? And I use Germany as an example just because he was going back and forth with them this week and pulling troops out and everything. And Emmanuel Macron last week was talking about the coordination, the obvious coordination between Trump, China, and Russia, and saying that they're all against Europe. I was like, yeah, man, been trying to warn you guys for a little while about that. But what's funny about them is that Macron or Merz in Germany, they're basically saying what you just said. They're basically saying like, yeah, Trump has all the power, the Americans have all the power, and we can't do anything about it. And again, it's the funny situation where we're sitting over here going like, yeah, you're right, bitch. Like, you can't do anything about it. And I don't know. I mean, if we are to actually get the whole world to try to move in this direction, I think I'm starting to realize it's going to be a little different than I thought, where I'm thinking Trump's going to make the best argument years ago. Trump's going to make the best argument. He's going to build the country into the place it needs to be. Everybody will follow us. Maybe that happens. But in the short term, maybe Trump is totally willing to and even planned to play the villain to get everybody to move in that direction, right? When it comes to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and it's funny because the absolute beauty of this plan is at the end of it, Trump is actually ceding power back to everybody. So he's actually saying, hey, we have to do this cleanup job, but after we clean this up, we're actually handing power back to each individual country individually for them to live a peaceful, prosperous life. He wants other countries to be productive, right? But he knows that a lot of these factions are controlled by small groups of entities that don't have the best interest of everybody else in mind. And really, when you look at it from that perspective, it's very hard to see that. But it's also very hard to see, for some, why Bitcoin, right? And why we even talk about this stuff. But, if you realize that, this financial system, the incentive structure from the fiat cartel that we currently live in, America doesn't need Bitcoin, right? America needs the actual least, okay? And when you understand that, and you're like, well, wait a minute, if we don't need Bitcoin because we have superior military, we have superior currency, and we're just showing everybody we can just kick their ass, we can freeze their funds on any other system out there. He's making kind of the world like eat their vegetables. I mean, like, yo, this is what's going to happen. If you step out of line, I'm going to spank you and you're going to have to try again, right? Like, you're going to have to figure it out. But at the end of the day, that's the beauty of this plan is taking out the small groups of people that control these things. And he's essentially going to hand people back their power at the end of this. And we'll get into why that is. But that's the beauty of this thing. And that's why he's attacked for such unfair reasons. But when you see the special road and path that we have that we're going on, it's absolutely unbelievable, to be honest.
Yeah, and I like that. It's almost like he's provoking people into taking their power back, right? Like, and a few years ago, obviously the intro to the DPH, the infamous power back to the people speech, back in 2017 is something that we all reference all the time. And, there were times when I definitely was in that group of people thinking like, yeah, he's going to fix everything. And then there's going to be this big ceremony and we're all going to get our power given back to us. I mean, obviously I didn't think it was going to be that literal, but we all kind of had various versions of that. But I think the brilliance of what's going on now and the sort of, I think Ghost has been talking about we're in the Joker phase of Trump where we got sort of the Batman phase, but now we've kind of got the Joker chaos agent phase of Trump on the world stage. And he's kind of forcing everybody. This is the feedback loop concept that Chris and John talk about a lot, where Trump is okay with people challenging him and that maybe that might be the point. And one of the ironic things, obviously my wife is Canadian and reformed Canadian, rewilded, but I deal with more Canadians than anybody ever should have to. And one of the funny things pretty recently, I think this was back in New Year's timing, was arguing with her parents, of course, about Trump stuff. And there's this resurgence in Canadian nationalism over the last year and a half. And a lot of it is in response to Trump kind of taking turns going at each different country. He calls them our so-called allies. And I said to them, your resurgent nationalism is exactly what Trump has been trying to get you to do. So the irony is, the more angry you get at him about how mean he's being to your fake president, the more you're literally doing exactly what Trump wants. Like Canadians all of a sudden care about strong borders. They care about military power. They care about economic sovereignty. And it's like, well, this is exactly what Trump has been doing in the United States for the last 10 years that they all hate. So it feels to me like there's some provoking that he's doing on purpose with all these people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he wants people to take their power back, but the problem is that people have been domesticated for so long. They have continually trusted people that do not deserve to be trusted. And he's showing them, like, if you don't take your power back, someone is going to exploit you. Someone is going to take advantage of you, and you have to do something about it. You have to counterpunch. You have to fight back. And that's what's funny about this, when he did come down or did make that inaugural speech talking about giving power back to the people, because power is not just going to be handed back to the people. People have to actually take that power back. Now he's giving it to you. He's allowing you to take it back, but the individual has to act. There has to be agency involved, because you don't have any agency through voting. You don't have any authority because you hand over your authority and power to your politicians. And so you've never had agency in the system because you've never been able to own anything without coercion through the end of a barrel of a gun. And so when you look at it through those perspectives, well, what else is there, right? And that's really what we want to discuss is how does an individual take their power back in today's society, in the informational age, in the digital age? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, and going back to what might actually be going on with Iran, with Venezuela, with all this stuff, with the Trump power paradigm. My boy Scott, I like bringing him up because I've been joking that Scott Bessent is sort of the guy on the team that just says what's going on in a way that very few of the other guys do. And sometimes I'm like, man, do people not take him seriously because he's the finance guy and they don't pay attention to that? This is so I'm going to show, this is an article I've showed a million times, but this is from the Wall Street Journal 2024. And Bessent was talking about this stuff all year in 2024, and we were talking about it at the time. He says, Scott Bessent sees a coming global economic reordering, and he wants to be a part of it. So this was at, a big finance conference where all the small club talks to each other. But just think about that. We talked about this in 2024 before Trump got reinaugurated, and we speculated that what was going to happen in Trump 2.0 was leading us toward an economic reset, a currency reset, trade resets. And it's easy to project those things, but look at what's going on with Iran. We've got Scott Bessent here. This is a headline from today, from this weekend. Bessent on Iran, quote, "We are suffocating the regime." This was him a few days ago. U.S. sanctions 35 individuals and entities to dismantle Iran's shadow banking apparatus. He said, the shadow banking system serves as a critical financial lifeline for armed forces, talks about proxy networks, terrorist operations, And I talked about this last week a little bit, but to me, it's like, man, if you take Iran out of the headlines and you just focus on Bessent talking about the regime and those sanctions that he handed down, everyone's focusing on Iran. But if you actually read what the sanctions are, they're sanctioning any money that has gone into the Iranian regime and any institution that has been involved with that, and talking about proxy networks. And you said a few minutes ago, this is the problem with saying Iran or Venezuela or this regime and that regime, because as you said, it's everybody knows that it was Western intelligence that literally installed the new regime. And it was, to your point, Western banking, specifically European banking, that financed it. So I just think when you take that, what we know about who installed these regimes, then you take the fact that Bessent said we're going to have a global economic reordering, and now we've got these regime change operations popping off around the world, and Scott Bessent is taking the mic more frequently than Donald Trump is. It leads me to believe that maybe the reordering that we're looking at is a lot more of an economic thing, and that this was all planned in advance, which might also tell you why the Europeans are the ones who are most pissed off about this.
Yeah, he's even called for a Bretton Woods 2.0 for a restructuring of the financial system, just even recently. And so you start putting all these pieces together, and you're like, wow, Trump's gay assassin that lives in a pink house is really doing some damage to the global banking elite, right? But it's absolutely what's happening, and it's funny. It's a catch-22 for the cartels, for the shadow bankers. If they use Bitcoin, not only does it strengthen the Bitcoin network, but it also provides full transparency into where all the ins and outs are going. And Bessent actually recently just froze $500 million worth of stablecoins. And so it's kind of funny because Trump was like, well, you can use a transparent system that's, I can't take from you, but then we'll have full transparency of exactly what you guys are doing. And so keep lurking in the shadows. We're still going to find those networks. But when we find those networks, we're just going to freeze the funds. So you're screwed either way, right? Like you either take the bag of dog shit, right? Or you eat the Twinkie covered with shit on it. It's like, they don't have a good option here. And so it's funny to see how this is being done, because they are suffocating the current financial system. They're cutting off those actors, the Rothschild, Mossad, Zionist, whatever you want to call it, right? I don't even know, right? City of London, Vatican, all of it's connected, right? And those networks are absolutely being decimated. And we're just in time to reinstall a new system. It's not going to be one of those systems overnight, guys, right? Trump's not going to flash everyone's bank account with the Jasara bullshit, right? Like, it's a smooth transition. And like the problem I think the problem Bitcoin maxis have too, is that they think this can be wrapped up like in a year or two. This is a system that's been around for hundreds of years, guys. Like these networks and flow and just their entire, little independent, what do you call it? Little ecosystems, right? Like it's got like a slow waning off of this, because too much disruption too quick is going to cause a lot of death and destruction. And so Trump is like a surgeon, right? He's doing this brashly when he has to, but at the end of the day, like at things that he has to do surgically to provide the most stable transition to a new financial system that at the end of the day weakens American power, funny enough, in that global new world, global order that's going to be put and imposed upon the world.
Yeah, I'm going to play a little clip from you basically saying that, but I think it tees us up to talk a little bit more about this. This was...
Yeah, look, I mean, the new president's new pick, Kevin Warsh, is a crypto maximalist, right? He's a Bitcoin maxi. And so they're showing what freedom money looks like. They're showing how the banks are robbing everybody blind. They are keeping all the profits for themselves, and that a new administration based upon fairness and access to the system for everybody is going to provide a better world for the entire world. And so, look, Bitcoin, America needs Bitcoin the least. That's the funniest part about this thing, right? Like, why is Trump, right, issuing in at the end of this game? Bitcoin actually reduces American power, right? We have the strongest military. We have the world reserve currency. And so the people that are like dogging on Trump for not being a Bitcoin maximalist, he surrounded himself by Bitcoin maximalists, by the way. And so if you think about this, in the long run, Bitcoin actually diminishes U.S. power. And so what is happening there, right? I think people need to look deeper at that, because In essence, that's what's happening. Trump is ending the Federal Reserve's control structure for the last 100 years, and we're bringing about a Bitcoin golden age.
That I really like that clip, and you just said it a little bit, in different words a few minutes ago, but it's very in line with some stuff that I've been talking about from a little bit of a different angle, and specifically with Scott Bessent. I had written an article, so random which things blow up and which things don't, but my article in 2025 on Scott Bessent was called "The Wolf of Main Street," and it blew up like
yeah. Well, just the framing of it was unbelievable.
Yeah, and it blew up. The funny thing is, it blew up months after I wrote it. Like it got a little bit of recognition at the time, but then he came into the news somehow earlier this year. Maybe it was in February, and it kind of blew up and got a new lease on life. But what you said in that clip and on this show about the irony being a lot of Trump's moves in the second term are reducing American power, and I think we should flesh that out a bit because both of us think that's a good thing. And that was my whole thing with Scott Bessent, was to say, okay, we know that publicly Scott Bessent said, I want to be part of a global economic reordering. And we also know that he's famous for basically being the man who broke the British pound. That's what he's known for. And he did it for George Soros. He did it when he was working for the Soros Fund, which I think was called the Quantum Fund, funny enough. But so Bessent in the financial world is called the Hatchet Man. Like that's one of his nicknames. So the funny thing about that is what we were projecting before the term is if you're bringing in a guy who's maybe the world's foremost expert in destroying currencies, and if you're the United States and you have the US dollar, which is the world reserve currency, it's like 87% of global trade is settled in US dollars. Which currency is Scott Bessent being brought in to take a hammer to? And, I think it's kind of an interesting way to transition this, what we've been talking about with American power. I named the episode that, and your point in that clip is, I totally think you're right. There's a lot of what's going on here that seems to be Trump almost provoking, again, other countries, financial institutions into understanding, like, I should not be able to dominate you to the point that I can. And do you think that's part of what he's doing here? Like, he's actually trying to ironically reduce American power in some of these other theaters.
Yeah, and I think the first get-go is, look, every country has got their own little fiat game going on, right? They've got their own little power structures to where the people that are in control can just print the money and just do whatever they want, okay? And so the first thing I think Trump is doing is he's giving global access to the dollar, okay? He's giving everybody access to the dollar stable coins because he knows that these countries' currencies will blow up a lot quicker than the dollar, okay? And so eventually these countries are figuring out they're getting access to dollars through Tether, right? Tether is a major stablecoin issuer. And some people aren't going to get Bitcoin right away, but they know the dollar. They know that the dollar is definitely going to hold its value more than their own fiat shitcoin currency, and then the next natural step to that is Bitcoin, but if you really understand it and you logic that way out, if Trump became a Bitcoin maximalist, he's basically saying the dollar's done. And that's why I don't get on Trump for promoting his shitcoins. It's like, guys, he can't let the cat out of the bag, and just say, hey, here's what we're doing. It's funny. It's like the mainstream media that goes up to him and goes, what are you going to do next? It's like, I'm in a war, you idiots. Like, I'm going to tell you my next freaking move. And it's the same thing with the Bitcoin crypto thing. It's like, the whole thing is camouflaged, but in the background, you've got super tankers kind of chilling out there that are background and you see them. But you see these flashy little things go off. You're like, oh, well, look at that. Not realizing, right, there's this huge behemoth that is coming in to absolutely impose a new global order on everybody. Because at the end of the day, Donald Trump is special. We are not going to have another president like this. You are not going to vote some, we are very lucky to have this special moment in time with this special person in this very crucial time in our history, guys. I can't even begin to explain the crucial time that is happening right now and the crucial players that we have that are implementing this, because it's not going to matter who comes after Trump. because once this new global order has been established, it's going to reduce all their power, and then it's going to return power back to the people. And so it's funny where people say, well, who are we going to vote for after Trump? And he's talking about a third term. And like the stuff Trump is doing now is going to last 1,000 years. That's the crazy thing. Like this legacy Trump is leaving is not another 4-year election. It's not another midterms. And so for you guys that are thinking in those like short time spans, this is way, way bigger. And a lot of you guys just aren't thinking big enough.
Well, and that's the funny thing is that I think your stances on whether it's voting or elections, or I think the way you just put it is good in terms of time horizons and timescales. And people can somehow think that these stances are like anti-Trump or dooming when you're like, I don't give a shit about the midterms, which a lot of us at Badlands feel that way for various reasons. But what's funny is we all think of that as being like, you're not thinking big enough. We think that Trump is way cooler than you think he is if you think he's focused on the midterms. I wanted to show, to prove your point that you just were making about the currency, one of the victory laps that Scott Bessent also talks the most shit for a Treasury secretary we've ever had. But
dude,
just to show,
this guy gets in like fist fights too, I think, in the White House and stuff, dude.
Supposedly, yeah. There's these. I think that a lot of that is just like them having fun, but who knows? Maybe. But yeah, there was rumors that he was fighting Elon Musk in the West Wing. But this is a chart that Bessent put out a few days ago amid the impact of. By the way, he named it Operation Economic Fury, and one of the things I've been saying since last week is Trump is talking about Operation Epic Fury. And the way I would frame this is I think that Operation Epic Fury is Trump is leading the narrative. He's leading the story of what's going on here. And a few minutes ago, you used the term cover. Like Trump is running cover. That's what he does. Scott Bessent, I think, is running the real war, which is Operation Economic Fury. That's the real war. And to G's point about the currency, Bessent is telling you this. Amid the impact of economic fury, Iran's currency has hit an all-time low. The Iranian people deserve a new era, which the corrupt and shambolic Iranian regime cannot provide. With their oil industry closing, their currency plummeting, it's past time for the regime to concede the people of Iran deserve much better than the ruins of their current regime can provide. And I think, again, I think it is worth trying to get away from Iran framing and think about what you're talking about, which is every other nation right now is coming to that same conclusion and being like, man, the US dollar is so dominant over any other nation's sovereignty that their only choice basically is we either get on board with the American empire or we have to find some other way to be sovereign. And, some of the smaller nations seem to be just kind of bending and saying, okay, we'll get on the dollar system for a little while. But some of the bigger nations, your Russias of the world, your Chinas of the world, they're the ones openly talking about going around the dollar and finding new ways around the dollar. And then Iran, very publicly, I know that people say not a lot of Bitcoin was actually moving on chain during this, but I look at the narrative value of the Iranian regime saying like, well, we're going to start settling payments in Bitcoin. So the funny thing is when you look at Trump and Bessent as like the heels on the global stage, the response to them is short-term helping the dollar, which Trump said he was going to do, to your point. But long-term, it is showing every nation, if you don't want to be beholden to the dollar, you have few options out there. But there might be a juicy option that everybody could get involved in that, would make American, to your point, would ironically reduce American power, which just might be what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and all these corrupt little organizations and factions and rebel, all these different things are done through fiat currencies, you guys, and they're done all across the globe. And so Trump is implementing a new world order based upon fairness, right? And he's backing it with energy, okay? Because at the end of the day, like hyper Bitcoinization is actually hyper Americanization. So we're actually bringing democracy, quote unquote, through a fair network that anybody can join, that restores power back to the individual, that restores property rights back to the individual. And so it's funny because when you understand that you're empowering all these nation states with private property ownership, right? not sanction-proof money, not this SWIFT network and all the bullshit, you're actually reducing American power. But you have to understand, Trump has to take out the bad guys in all these countries first, because it's not going to be done, right? These small groups of people that run these countries, that bad, you guys. That's how bad they've been oppressed, because they've been ran by these small groups of people. And so Trump is crushing them. And then he's also saying, look, if you guys continue to print your money into oblivion, people are just going to start adopting our dollar quicker, and your power is going to actually decimate quicker. So either you can be a good guy and try to fix your nation, or you're going to end up in ruins. And so I think it's fair that he's actually giving these people a choice. Most of them, he's saying, do you want to live a prosperous, abundant future, or do you want to be a corrupt piece of shit? And unfortunately, 95% of them want to be corrupt pieces of shit. And so they're going to have to take the hard pill, man. And that's just how it's going to have to go down.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we'll start transitioning more directly into Bitcoin. But even before that, I think one of the terms I use all the time, and just how I try to figure out what isn't going on more than what is going on, is I always use reverse indicators. And I like looking at what the enemy is saying. And I think the interesting thing when we're talking about Scott Bessent and Donald Trump, and we're talking, you just mentioned a global order, a new order, but ironically, it's like an order against the old world order. And that's why my show with Ghost I did last week, we basically called it the new world order, and it's dismantling the old one, right? But the funny thing is, the reverse indicators are still the best thing to look at. Because if you think anything G just said is crazy, or anything I said is crazy about Trump and Bessent actually going against the allies and going against the US dollar on a longer timeline, why is Europe freaking out the most about what Trump is doing? Like, we are told, according to the central narrative, that the Russians are very close allies with the Iranians. They met with them last week. Meanwhile, right after that, Donald Trump has a 90-minute phone call, we're told, with Putin. And the two get off the phone and tell their respective governments and peoples, yeah, the call went great. Like, we're getting along well. I'm looking forward to meeting Xi in China next month or this month or whatever it is. And you got Emmanuel Macron out there talking about how the US and Russia and China are against them. You got Germany out there talking about how Trump has no plan and he should withdraw from Iran. So if Iran is part of the enemy regime, and I mean the country and where it's going, why are Germany and France and all the rules-based international order, why are they the ones most angry about what Trump is doing there? While Xi and Putin supposedly are the defenders of the Iranian regime, but they haven't done shit. They haven't threatened Trump at all. So that's one of those things. It's like sometimes, and you've used these reverse indicators for years when it comes to currency, when you're like, hey, am I still on the right path with something like Bitcoin? Well, what does the ECB think of it? What does the Federal Reserve think of it? What do all the worst people in the world think of it? And that might give you a clue as to whether or not they consider it a threat to them.
Well, and it goes back to the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, right? What did Russia do? It said, well, you want our natural gas? You're going to have to pay for it in our currency. You can't print money, right, and just pay for it in euros. And so they're shutting off, right, their power structures, right, through the monetary system, right? And Europe is freaking out because the grift of Iran is coming to an end, okay? The grift of their fiat currency is mainly how they've held power this long. And so it's kind of like encroaching at every level, and it's surrounding them. And so absolutely they're freaked out, because first it's going to be the dollar, and then it's going to be Bitcoin, right? And hyper dollarization eventually leads to hyper Bitcoinization, which eventually leads to hyper Americanization. So it's like nothing can stop what is coming is literally this thing. And it's so, yeah, man, it's kind of a slow, grueling process, but it's done, I think, with the caveat of like life coming first. Like, let's protect as many human lives as we can, but like this has to get done. So like some people are going to die, right? That's just nature of how this battlefield's going to work. But it's going to move at a pace too that is going to be everly increasing. We're not going to slow it down. We can't slow it. They cannot slow it down. And that's why I think you see the narratives coming out recently from even our own military that are advancing the narrative of power projection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get into the power projection. I did have one more thing I wanted to ask you about before that, man, I had the clip pulled up just
Which
a
one
little
was
bit
it?
ago, but I lost it. I don't think it was one you sent me, but it was a California politician talking about that they think it was one of these guys, I think, from the All In podcast, who they were like, "What's your big what's your unpopular opinion?" And he was talking about California. You just made me think of it because you're talking about this transition. It's rough, I think. I mean, I just paid in Massachusetts. I just filled up today and paid like $4.29 a gallon, right? And you would laugh at that. And I was reading this weekend all about California and $6.50 and $7 and all this shit.
Oh, yeah.
And I was reading about like the California energy system, basically, that while US gas fuel is obviously going up right now, like everybody's is, Europe's is like $10 a gallon. So they're getting absolutely fucked. And then the next closest place is California. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Like if we're talking about this boiling the frog kind of approach, it's tough for everybody, but it seems like certain areas are really being highlighted. And I wonder, like, you're on the ground there, you're a California guy, you know a lot of California normies and maxis. Is this having like a different effect on them with the Iran stuff, not just money wise, but mentally? Do you think they're starting to look at California specifically, and why did we end up in this position?
Yeah, it's funny. I come back to that quote where life is tough, but it's tougher if you're good, and so and the narrative I kind of come back to is like, we're going to solve these things through technology. I hear a lot of my friends bitching about the price of gas, and I'm sitting here in my Cybertruck Tesla that drives itself, just drove itself to Vegas, and I'm like, what's funny is the gas prices haven't actually affected me at all. I've not paid 1 cent more than I have, forever. And so it's kind of funny where like this new world of the transition is like, hey, there's this car over here that like drives itself and you don't have to worry about gas prices and all this other stuff, but you can still use your like combustion engine if you want. But like, there's this easier, faster, quicker, like less stress-free life you could live. And so it's kind of like a choice at this point to be stupid and like choose the harder route. It's like, hey, do I want to walk there or do I want to use a bicycle? Like what transportation are going to make it easier for you? But no, a lot of people are getting hit hard from the energy. And I think the energy costs going up are going to just cause inflation to go up, right? I kind of think of this thing where prices of everything are going to go up, but the price of Bitcoin is really where all that hidden inflation is going to actually get sucked into. So it doesn't totally destroy the entire middle class, because if prices of everyday goods go up way too quick, it will absolutely decimate the entire middle class. Yeah. And so what's going to happen is I think you're going to see hyper Bitcoinization through the inflation rate and through the monetary system, and Bitcoin just kind of keep creeping up. And you're going to see prices of everyday goods going up, but you're going to see all that inflation, I think, is going to be trapped into the Bitcoin network when this thing gets going full steam.
Well, and the reason I asked about California too, besides the money, is to like they've had a lot going on the last few years, and you're even getting like celebrities in California doing their turns on podcasts and kind of talking about whether it's organic or not. And I kind of wonder, because they're getting hit so hard right now, they might not like Trump, but if they're sitting there like looking more at California government more than they have in the past, like, are you getting the impression that people in California are finally starting to look at that shit? Because that's one of the like silver linings we look for when the frog is being boiled. If everyone's getting fucked, and in California you're getting fucked at double the rate of everybody else, at what point do Californians start actually looking? I know you and your circles obviously have thought this way, but if you think normies out there are actually starting to be like, maybe this has been a little bit mismanaged.
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind mostly is Spencer Pratt. He's kind of making a lot of noise with the LA fires and what our local leadership has done, and so that's kind of, I think, the most important narrative right now, because it's showing the failure in that leadership. But it's funny, right? Because it's just another Hollywood grifter that wants to get power, and it's like, well, what are you going to do, man? You're just going to get in that position, and then you're going to probably do something similar at some point. Because the incentive structures through political systems, through most of that is corrupt. And so only when we, the people, have the decision to choose what projects get funded and not through our own pocketbooks, is this really going to come down to individual power and sovereignty. But I think for the most part, they're blaming, a lot of the oil stuff on Trump. But what's funny too about about the oil prices is that, when I fill up my Tesla with electricity, I don't pay a gasoline tax. Half the price of our gas in California is tax. And a lot of people don't understand that. They just think it costs more money because we live in California, which is insane. But if you peel it away, it's because of all the taxes that are built into the fuel prices. But they don't itemize the tax out. They just charge you a flat fee.
Right.
And so, again, it's that hidden cost of taxation, right? It's taxation without representation. And so that's what's another double-edged sword with the electric vehicles, is that you're stripping away all that tax money from the fuel costs that are built into that price, because you don't pay that with the electric car fill-ups.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's again, that boiling the frog approach where I'm like, at some point, everybody's got to get on the same page with this shit or remain retarded. I want to play a tiny, tiny clip that is like your favorite clip ever that you sent over. I saw it on your feed because I think it just tees up a lot of the main stuff we want to talk about. It goes into, us talking about Trump having a master plan. That's not crazy to most of the people watching this show. Most people watching this show believe Donald Trump is some kind of genius, or at least is a part of a plan that's much bigger than him. So I want to show two very short clips back to back, one with Donald Trump, one with somebody else. And in light of us thinking, and G for a long time thinking, there might be more going on here from a financial perspective than just playing with some meme coins. So you guys tell us what you think Donald Trump means here.
There's never been anything like it, and I don't think you've ever seen anything like it. And most people have no idea what the hell it is. You know that, right? So what happens when they figure it out? That's going to really be something.
I'm going to replay that because, think about it in light of us being crazy and talking about 5D chess Donald Trump, and there's a global economic reordering Scott Bessent's telling you about. By the way, this is obviously, as it says there, Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. And this got Trump a lot of the maxi vote and everything, who have been kind of mad at him since he took office because Bitcoin stopped mooning and he looks like he's just defending the dollar. But if you don't think there's more method to the madness here, why would Trump talk about an investment vehicle like this? Does it say, listen to what he says and let me know if you guys think he is talking about an investment.
There's never been anything like it, and I don't think you've ever seen anything like it. And most people have no idea what the hell it is. You know that, right? So what happens when they figure it out? That's going to really be something. Bitcoin is not just a marvel of technology. As you know, it's a miracle of cooperation and human achievement. There's never...
I mean, man, what do you think about that? There's a lot in 19 seconds.
Yeah, look, man. I mean, I've been playing this clip for 2 years now. And so, again, stupid people are going to remain stupid. Donald Trump has a lot of signal through a lot of his noise. He's a master communicator. And Eric Trump, funny enough, is actually doing an amazing job. Recently, I just got back from the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. I was probably sitting less than 10 feet away from Eric Trump at a private whale lounge talk he did with Natalie Brunell. And it's funny because Natalie is a Bitcoin maxi, but she kept hitting Trump with these coins and what about the Trump coin and this and that. And Eric kept having to say, look, I invested in a Bitcoin mining company called American Bitcoin. We've gathered and we're almost at 7,000 Bitcoin in 7 months, which has put us the top 10 of public companies in the United States. And it was really funny because Eric Trump actually shared the same frustrations me and you have, and he kind of he kind of sighed and he's like, my dad has done more than any of you guys can really fathom at this point for crypto adoption to bring about this new transition in the special time that we're in. He framed it really just like that. And
I don't know if it's in this clip you sent over.
It's not, unfortunately.
Okay.
It's not.
We'll get to that
clip.
one then.
Yeah, we'll get to that one, but it's not in that clip. But he was frustrated because he has to weave this narrative of the Trump meme coins and the shit coins and the world liberty stuff. But he's all, he can't let the cat out of the bag. And so it's a difficult position, but he was able to masterfully communicate, look, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm supporting infrastructure. But yeah, we have to meme coins, because a lot of the Bitcoin maxis don't understand the culture war of crypto, and that the Trump family is helping people adopt crypto. Right? The world is, okay? And people love Trump from all over the globe. It's not just an American thing. And so when some kid in another country wants to buy Trump coin and get into crypto for the first time, like that young kid or person has the ability to transition to Bitcoin at some point. And so Trump is opening up this huge window, this huge bridge to bring as many people across as he can. And then he wants people to figure it out. He's like, well, this Trump shitcoin, you know, I'm the only one that can issue it. And he froze this other stuff. And like, I think all these scandals recently with World Liberty Financial is just highlighting the fact that it is a shitcoin, if anything, you know? And so really he's educating the masses through culture and through bringing as many people along as he can. But yeah, it's frustrating because we kind of see it, but we can also, I mean, we can, but obviously the Trump family can't, because again, if Trump becomes a Bitcoin maximalist, he believes the dollar is going to zero. And that's just like a very first principle based approach when you logic your way all the way out through this game theory.
I think, I want to address that. First of all, I want to address that you said something truly genius that only a true genius would say, where you mentioned that there's a bridge being built. And it reminds me of this article I wrote. The first time I wrote about Bitcoin was in 2023 after being orange-pilled by you, and I framed it as the bridge. It was the beginning of my timeline war series, Weapons of the Future to the Future. I talk about even that evil bad man Elon Musk in this one, and how maybe these two things are more related than people think. But, you know, to your point there, I think there's a couple points. Number one, just Trump saying what he said in Nashville. If you think he's talking about some sort of investment, I don't know, you know, these things can be multifaceted, right? But wait until people figure out what it is. That'll really be something, you know. Sure, you can straw man it and say he's just talking about an interesting technology, but it is interesting, and we'll get to some other quotes from some other notable figures that will paint a more clear picture here. But I think it's good to lead with that Trump clip of him talking about it, which you've been referencing this a lot over the years. The signal to what Trump said, I think, is that he specifically kept framing it as a technology. And, you know, I know people know that Bitcoin is a technology, but usually it's referred to in terms of currency. It's referred to in terms of investing and things like that, even by a lot of Bitcoin maximalists. And Trump, though, who a lot of Bitcoin maximalists, ironically, don't think understand Bitcoin, is talking about it as a technology from the start. And I think that's notable. But another figure, I wanted to play a brief clip that this is from your show with Pip from a few years ago. I think this was 2023. It might have been 2024. But you had a little guy named Michael Saylor on here. By the way, Eric Trump himself tells you that Michael Saylor is a close family friend and has been for over 20 years. I believe he said back in the 90s, which is pretty interesting. And very brief clip here from when Saylor went on Rug Pull Radio, which, by the way, is just fucking awesome that he did that. And I feel if anybody has not said that, if that's still archived, that's probably still on the channel, right?
The Saylor episode, yeah.
Yeah, you guys need to watch that, because whether you've seen a lot of Saylor content or not, I personally felt like at the time Saylor really dropped a little bit of the Saylor character in that, because I think Saylor tends to adopt the power level of whoever he's speaking to, and he was asked about Satoshi.
It seems pretty clear to me that that Satoshi is American technologist. I think came from America, but I don't really think it's all that constructive to try to figure out who it was. I think it's better just to note that it was a very talented engineer or group of engineers working together under a pseudonym. It seems pretty clear to me that...
By the way, I did not speed up Saylor. I usually speed up my clips.
You can click on the settings, I think, and play it back at half speed. It's better.
Okay.
Do the half speed.
Oh, yeah, I think it was sped up. Okay, here we go.
It seems pretty clear to me that that Satoshi is American technologist. I think came from America, but I don't really think it's all that constructive to try to figure out who it was. I think it's better just to note that it was a very talented engineer or group of engineers working together under a pseudonym. It seems pretty clear.
And, you know, I just think that's an interesting thing. You're talking about the Satoshi thing, and he's framed this, Saylor frames this in many different ways. But the reason I wanted to play those two clips in pretty close succession is when you look at Saylor, who's basically acting as this force multiplier literally on the Bitcoin network, but he's also kind of acting as this demolitions expert on the financial system. And then you've got Trump there saying, this is a technology. When people figure it out, that's really going to be something to see. You've got Michael Saylor, like the world's most famous Bitcoin guy right now, talking about how it might have been a group of people. We don't really ever need to know who it was, but he knows that they're American, or he thinks that they're American. Then you go back into some of those rabbit holes you've gone down for years of, look who was at MIT and how does that... Oh, by the way, lest I forget, one of the big reasons that the Nashville conference with Trump really spurred me out at the time in a good way was that Trump followed Michael Saylor. So Saylor gave one of his most famous speeches there. I think he followed Saylor. Or Saylor followed Trump. I think it was Saylor followed Trump. But either way, Trump talks about what he talks about. Saylor's framing everything in that conference through the lens of power projection and energy and all that kind of stuff he talks about a lot. Trump at that Nashville conference told the Bitcoin maximalist crowd, I'm a little smarter than a lot of you think you are, and you're not as smart as a lot of you think you are. And the context of when he said that, he was talking about his Uncle John at MIT. And a lot of people in this audience have gone down the John Trump rabbit holes. Tesla technology, what was going on there, how far back does the Trump family go? Uncle John was MIT. And then Michael Saylor takes the stage. The two don't acknowledge each other in their speeches. And Saylor immediately starts talking about Tesla technology, was the whole theme of his Nashville speech. So I'm like, guys, you got Trump on stage saying, when you figure it out, it's really going to be something. And by the way, my Uncle John is smarter than you guys think. You should look him up. And Uncle John is famous for Tesla tech. And then Michael Saylor from MIT goes and does a big speech about Bitcoin and relates it to Nikola Tesla. I don't know, man. Like that, to me, that's one of those moments. And then he goes on your podcast and says all that. Or I think that was before, but either way.
Yeah, no, it was before. Yeah, it was quite the conference, and it's just that entire speech. Go listen to it. It's like 45 minutes. Was pure signal out of Trump. A lot of signal in there. But at the end of the day, like Trump summed it up very well at the end, and he said, "Bitcoin is about freedom, sovereignty, and independence from government coercion or control." Now, that last piece is probably the most important, right? Because that's bit power, that's soft war, that is Bitcoin as a weapon system, right? That is independence from government coercion and control, right? And that is the system we live in. We are not independent from government coercion and control because they own everything. They own your house, they own your bank accounts. You have no ownership of anything in America. But GMoney, I own my house. Yeah, if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to take it from you, right?
Yep.
They can, indict a ham sandwich, right? And so, no, I mean, that's all part of this. And Saylor, funny enough, even though he talks about in those terms, hasn't mentioned any of the current military leaders talking about Bitcoin as power projection. Just so happens, right? Like, But yeah, he's a wrecking ball to and it's the funny part about this too, is that a lot of Bitcoiners are hating on Michael Saylor now, saying he's centralizing Bitcoin because he's buying too much of it, And so it's funny because, the Bitcoiners, here we are 17 years later, we're getting this adoption at scale through probably a very freedom-loving minded small government person. And they're mad at him for buying too much Bitcoin.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah. And even though like the amount of Bitcoin you have doesn't give you any extra, ownership of the rules of the network. You may own more coins, but it doesn't give you any special access to the rules system. And that's what's different, right? Like, the ownership does not affect the rules of the system in any shape or form.
Well, that also brings up a point you said earlier. You used the term bridge. I'm joking around, obviously, but I think that's big, and I think it ties into what we opened the show with, which is this transition and this global reordering and American power. I think part of, if we're right about that this is part of a larger transition plan, broadly speaking, let's just call it a transition plan. Even if you're not a Bitcoin maxi in the audience, you probably agree that Donald Trump is part of a transition. He talks about the golden age, right? He talks about bringing us into the golden age. Well, what is he talking about? And I think the interesting thing there, and I think Saylor is very relevant to this, he was huge for me in really understanding, or I think understanding what's going on here. To your point about the traditional financial world and Saylor, I actually think part of Saylor's job is to stabilize the transition to a Bitcoin-backed future. Because if you look at, his company strategy, eventually, if you're right about Bitcoin, then the balance sheet of strategy is going to go ridiculous, ballistic, right? What happens there is that it's going to be introduced and ratified, so to speak, into the S&P 500. And that, to me, is big, because it means that everybody, whether or not you're a Bitcoin person, everybody who owns a 401k, who is part of some union or whatever, boomers and the rest, are all going to be investing on a weekly basis in strategy, which means that Bitcoin is like infecting everybody's balance sheet. And the funny thing about it, and I still haven't written that article, but I've been writing notes for years about this. The idea, I think I was on your show at the time talking about like Saylor being like a reverse vampire, where it's almost like he's injecting a serum into a vampiric system, and the system itself is going to perpetuate and continue buying more of it, and it can't stop, right? Because all these passive index funds and hedge funds are going to be buying strategy. And every time they buy strategy, Saylor turns around and takes that fiat and puts it right into Bitcoin. So it's this flywheel. And to your point about the Bitcoin maxi audience, that's why, G might be a maxi, but he's by no means somebody that's going to tell you Bitcoin maxis all know what's going on. They're all getting mad about this. And to me, I'm like, guys, he's kind of infecting the global financial system and the banking apparatus with Bitcoin.
Yeah. Like, the future for their reset was very bleak, right? It was social credit scores. It was total surveillance. It was total control of everything that you did. And really, this was kind of our last shot, right? Like, they were going to absolutely collapse the system. They were going to take all the assets, and they were going to make you own nothing and be happy. And so you're absolutely right. Where Saylor has inverted that reset into, you might call it a good reset, Bernie Bright, and taking that satanic energy, purifying it, right, sending it back, and that's what stablecoins are doing. Stablecoins are turning a fractional reserve banking system, money out of thin air, into a fully backed banking or apparatus where they do have reserves. And again, he's letting the banks let them adopt or die. If they do not adopt the stable coins, if they do not adopt this new framing of crypto, they will simply die off. And the banks are absolutely freaking out because, again, a lot of the theft comes from the yield, right? Trump is saying, hey, these people are ripping you off and they're building these big billion-dollar buildings and they're keeping it all for themselves. They're not allowing you. And that's why they're fighting so hard against this Clarity and Genius Act, because the yield is going to be transferred from the banks directly to you through stablecoins. It's actually going around their system. They don't need the banks anymore because the banks are protecting all that yield for themselves. And it's just funny because Eric goes on to talk about, the antiquated financial system and how they don't need all these people pushing papers for all these different fees that they rack up. And so it's just part of it. But Trump is giving them a choice. He's giving them the freedom of choice to end what they have going on and adopt and help everybody, or they can go out of business and be miserable. So, but that's what's happening, right? And that's what's happening in the background right now, actually.
I want to play a couple clips you actually sent over and then we can go on this, but to the point you just made. And, it's worth noting, by the way, just like we wonder about Donald Trump's history and that he's a lot smarter than he tells people he's a lot smarter than they think he is. Michael Saylor is an engineer. That's his whole thing, right? Like his mind is an engineering mind. So it's kind of interesting to think about strategy through that lens. The fact that he's not just engineering this company, but if he is a part of something bigger, then what might his role be? To your point about Eric Trump, this is probably one of the clips that best exemplifies that of what Eric Trump thinks of the role of Bitcoin.
am dead serious about replacing traditional finance with cryptocurrency. I'm dead serious about this. This isn't fun. This isn't trading meme coins. This isn't screwing around. This isn't gambling on brands you like. I am dead serious about the rails of what cryptocurrency will do, and having America lead the way, and curing so many of the wrongs that have been perpetrated against so many people, including both of you and me, based on what you just said. And so there's a lot of people. I'm dead.
So just for, I want your response to that, G, but just for context for people, that was a few months ago. I remember seeing that at the time. The context of that was that Eric Trump was talking about being debanked and the Trump family being debanked. So to G's point about, banking and what is Bitcoin really here to do? Well, there's Eric Trump talking about whether it's stablecoins, Bitcoin, et cetera. He does not see it as an ally to banks. He seems to see it as something that could take them down.
Yeah, and every time Eric Trump says crypto, okay, I mean he means Bitcoin. But again, he's weaving this masterful communication strategy to as many people as possible. He's not being a psychotic Bitcoin maxi. He's saying, hey, crypto, let the best man win. Really, he's saying capital markets, free markets. If your shitcoin beats Bitcoin, there's probably a problem, right? But it's absolutely not going to happen. And so, that's a framing I think a lot of Bitcoin maxis get mad. He said, not Bitcoin. And they're like, they're thinking Bitcoin, this fragile network technology, like it's the strongest, most secure network on the planet. And here you are worried that Trump's meme coin is somehow going to like take down Bitcoin, and it's kind of, it's just kind of ironic that they don't have enough faith to have bigger thoughts on it than that.
That reminds me, that's a great way to put it, because it reminds me of a lot of what we deal with in the truth community. Let's use the topic of voting, where let's say you in the audience think that Chris Paul and GMoney are very mean when they talk about voting, and you think that you don't think that that's the plan. Fine, right? Maybe you guys are wrong about what you think the plan is. But to your point, it's like this small dog syndrome where truthers try to stop people like you and us from talking about fraudulent election systems because we might disrupt the plan. And as Chris always says, we might disrupt the plan that nothing can stop, right? And to your point about Bitcoin maximalists, it's like, hold on, you guys are Bitcoin maximalists and you think nothing can stop it and nothing stops this train. But if Donald Trump confuses normies about meme coins, Bitcoin is going to fail. Again, these are like these contradictions that I don't even think people understand that they hold. But I think that goes on in the truth community where they're like, man, if we don't unify with the Republicans in Congress, and win the midterms in a fake election, the plan nothing can stop is definitely ruined. And if we don't, only talk about Bitcoin and not talk about crypto, then the Bitcoin network is going to fail.
Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious. And, we got to be honest, like the youth isn't going to go to Bitcoin first. They're going to go to a meme coin. They're going to go to some cat picture. They're going to go to some NFT or whatever. And let them learn. Like the youth have a lot of they've got some time to actually figure this out. And they're going to be rewarded the most because, again, the boomers and everybody else have stolen from them through through the years of money printing that they've all, done with real estate and all this other stuff. And so, it's just kind of ironic that they have this dance. But Eric Trump has been full signal. And again, he was making the same point at the Bitcoin conference to that degree. So,
we're going to get into power projections specifically in a few minutes. But before that, I did want to play a little, I don't know if we'll watch the whole thing. It's like 3 minutes, but just a little bit more from Saylor and that you had sent over earlier. I think you had sent it over or I saw it on your feed and took it. But either way, I think this is an interesting little clip from Saylor because it should show you that a guy, to your point, people are accusing of centralizing Bitcoin. This is how this guy talks about government. And again, keep in mind, this is a guy that is often at Mar-a-Lago or every once in a while is at Mar-a-Lago. This is a guy that Eric Trump maintains a close friendship with and says he has for a long time, calls him a genius and calls him an unrecognized genius. So it's interesting to hear what he thinks about government.
just describing political metabolic disease. It's just everything gets too big. Big government, big charity, big bank, big education, big medicine, big foreign policy, big defense. Everything just gets too big and somebody's got to pay it. And, you know, in nature, when a creature gets too big, it collapses under its own weight, right? There are no 100-ton mammals on land, right? The elephant is the limit to what nature can create. And you try to get any larger than that and you collapse under your own weight. So I think natural law dictates humility, you know, and generally less is more.
So what is the right size of government?
Smaller the better. The smallest possible government. The minimum, right? That would be the libertarian answer, but that would be an economist answer too. Because
not every economist.
The bigger the government, most government intervention is iatrogenic, right? Crippling. It cripples everything, right? Look, if you go back and you try, what's funny though is it's not new. Like there were laws, there was a monopoly on who's able to bake bread in colonial New York. Like the governor thought that it was rational to basically prohibit people from baking bread. You know, like silly laws. You're not allowed to cross the Hudson River. You know, and so generally government form, and the first thing the government forms is it begins to issue licenses and monopolies on who gets that land and who gets to cross the river and who operates the ferry and who bakes bread. There was a monopoly on making of hats. Okay, only someone with a license from the governor can make a hat. Huh? Well, some guy's willing to pay the governor for exclusive license to make the hat, but you know, it's like you would laugh. It's like, really going to create a monopoly on making of hats and baking of bread? But yeah, you know, a foreign airline cannot connect two cities in the U.S. The Jones Act prohibits you from hauling cargo in a foreign vessel between 2 points in the U.S. on the ocean. Right, so we have all sorts of restraints of trade, right? Yeah, you name it. But you know, like, why did the Romans have to kill the Carthaginians? Because the Carthaginians were restraining trade on the Mediterranean, and you can't be an empire if someone else wants to take half the stuff in the ship. So why did the Carthaginians form? Well, because the Phoenicians were doing it. Why did people fight the Crusades? Because the Byzantines wanted to control the Eastern Med, and the Venetians didn't want that. And then eventually, so the Catholics or the Christians in Venice managed to get the Crusaders to sack the Christians in Istanbul, right, in Constantinople. And when we got done with that, the Turks wanted to control the trade in the Eastern Med, and we couldn't have that. So ultimately, all these wars are fought over commercial networks and the flow of money and power.
Man, I did not even watch that whole clip before the show, and didn't know this about the second half of it. That's why I kept it going. But you know, the beginning of that, it's interesting. Saylor's just a great listen because of his analogizing. I'm a fan of analogizing. But you know, obviously he's talking about small government. It's ironic because, to your point, Bitcoin maxis are accusing him of centralization and getting too big and all this kind of stuff, and he's kind of sitting there saying, like, hold on, I'm just playing by the rules that are laid out here, that are open source rules. But then the second half of that I didn't listen to before. And, you know, look at the Iran Strait, look at everything we talked about in the first hour of the show. Like, it's hard not to look at all of this, all of what we're looking at, as bolstering the argument like never before for decentralization and small government.
Yeah, I mean, I would go watch that entire episode. It's probably about an hour and a half, the Peter McCormick show. And I think it should be noted the big Trump building in the background through the window. So I'm not sure if you noticed that.
I didn't even notice that.
You didn't notice that? So like it's literally perfectly squared up with the Trump building in the background, foreshadowing that entire interview. You know, that's what Trump is doing right now, right? They're showing you that they're going to block access to trade if you use a shitcoin, right? So it's again like teaching them, no, you're going to have to use immutable, unconfiscatable money if you want to start transacting. And you know, what a great lesson for the world. You know, and it's funny, right? They started taking the tolls in Bitcoin through the Strait of Hormuz after they killed off Khomeini, right? So I'm sure Khomeini was under strict orders to not use Bitcoin and make sure that they only dealt in the shadow banking system. And so, you know, all these things are coming out. Trump is going to cut off the things that limit the access of this network to expand to the entire world. And, you know, he's doing it with the full might and force of the U.S. military. And so the U.S. military is imposing a new world of free market capitalism that will not only make companies compete and have free access to capital, but it's going to make governments compete. And at the end of the day, you are not going to be able to have bloated governments because they're not going to be economically feasible. And politicians get replaced with smart contracts. And the only thing that gets funded are with direct incentives and monies from the people. They're not going to be able to print their way to all these different institutional, corruption. They have to actually get money from the people. And that's where we kind of get into this weaponization part where, you know, your consent is a weapon now, right? You just the act of saying no to the jab was like, whoa, like I'm not going to like harm my body with something that is not, carefully, researched, right? And in the same way, Bitcoin is a weaponized choice to protect your energy as a human. You're getting that same option at this point to where at some point, the money the government prints will not be effective. And if the government cannot print money that's effective and they can't pay their soldiers to protect, right, the government, well, they're going to have to get rid of other programs. And, you know, Trump draining the swamp, he doesn't have to drain the swamp. The swamp drains itself, you know, and
right.
Governments just become service providers at the end of the day.
As they should be. We're going to transition a bit before G gets out of here into specifically power projection and national security, because there's some juicy stuff that happened over the last week in this world that nobody noticed except for psychos like you and because, you know, the Iran war, because of Trump's cover campaign. But before we get into some of that stuff, I want to thank our last sponsors, starting with ourselves at Soft Disclosure.
Last winter, the world met Madame Margie, the moistureless. But while Badlandia banded together at Gart, she evolved. While deep in her layer, she uncovered 4 sacred instruments of hydration. The lip balm, the lotion, the tallow bar, and the new stainless steel gua sha. Together, they wage war. Flaking has fallen, roughness retreats, dryness trembles, and among the rebels, Mother's good boy. But elsewhere in Badlandia, rebellion grows, the beards remain.
Shave them all off.
Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Mama's Boy for 20% off your Mother's Day bundle. And when you buy 2 Mother's Day bundles, you get an 11-ounce lavender vanilla for free. For softness, for victory, for moms.
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA.
What a strange, I'm here for the strange descent into madness that Soft Disclosure is turning into. So check that out, guys. And by the way, Mrs. Bright swears by that gua sha thing. She's like using it on her face. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's something. And we are also brought to you by a perfect sponsor for tonight's show, which is our friends at Rumble, specifically Rumble Wallet. All right, chat, real talk. If you actually want attention, there's a clear line to it. Here's how it works. We prioritize rants sent through Rumble Wallet, so that fiat trash. If you send one, we see it, we respond, simple as that. If you have questions, hot takes, and stuff you really want to react to, don't bury it in the chat. Put it in a rant, because regular chat flies by. I do see every single message, though, I assure you. When you use Rumble Wallet, it cuts through everything. Here's the move. Download the Rumble Wallet right now. Scan the QR code or hit the link. Setup is easy using MoonPay. You can use your debit or credit card or your existing bank account and send your first rant. We're going to start answering those as soon as they come in. And unlike other platforms, your support actually lands with us. It's not sliced up among a bunch of intermediaries on the way. and you get that direct interaction. It's a VIP lane. Use Rumble Wallet, send a rant, send those sats over, and we'll get to those. And I do appreciate the people who are using Rumble Wallet to tip us, because it cuts out all the intermediaries. And speaking of plans and everything, it's cool that Rumble themselves and Chris Pavlovsky over there, they seem to know a thing or two about maybe where stuff is going, because they keep converging Bitcoin technology and some of that stablecoin technology. But,
yeah, let's not forget Tether was a huge part of that as well. So
absolutely.
Funny
So
enough,
yeah, use
connected
Rumble
that.
Wallet, and thanks for supporting the show, Rumble Wallet. All right, man, I'm gonna tee you up on the biggest news of the last week, and we'll watch a little clip here. We've got a few clips, but we'll start with this one, which is just a little bit interesting. We had Admiral, 4-star military officer, Admiral Samuel Papparo. I believe he is Pacific Command. Yes, Indo-Pacific Commander. Talking to some government boys here. And listen to what he had to say about this old Bitcoin network.
Admiral Papparo, yesterday you testified that Bitcoin held potential as a tool for national security. Recent research from the Bitcoin Policy Institute.
Let me hit that one first, because I didn't realize this was the other order. So let me hit that one, what they're referencing here.
To another subject, our competition with China isn't just about military strength. It also includes monetary strength as well. Last year, the Chinese Communist Party's main monetary think tank published research on Bitcoin as a strategic asset. This came after President Trump moved to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Admiral, how does leadership in Bitcoin impact leverage resilience, deterrence for Indo-PACOM against China? And do you think that a strategic Bitcoin reserve helps America compete against China?
Senator, our research into Bitcoin is as a computer science tool. It's the combination of cryptography, a blockchain, and a proof of work. And Bitcoin shows incredible potential as a computer science tool that through the proof of work protocols it actually imposes more cost than just the algorithmic securing of networks and our ability to operate. And Bitcoin is a reality. It is a valuable computer science tool as a power projection. And outside of the economic formulation of it, it has got really important computer science applications for cybersecurity.
Thank you. What recommendations do you have for us here in Congress on how the U.S. can lead on Bitcoin competition?
I have to go deeper on that with you for the record, and I can go deeper on that case. But Bitcoin is a reality. It is a peer-to-peer, zero trust transfer of value. Anything that supports the all instruments of national power for the United States of America is to the good.
Thank you. I'll have to go back and listen to that answer to kind of decipher it. Most of us entered. You're way over our head.
I mean, holy shit, man! Like, what did you think about that when you saw that? That was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it just really kind of further solidifies my thesis of Bitcoin, Q, Trump, and this whole reorganization of power and how it's being distributed to the people. But I think the most important point of that entire thing, and we said it twice, he clarified it, is that Bitcoin is reality. Okay, and so we are so far removed from reality of natural law because of our fiat monetary system that everything, right, is literally fake and gay, right? And the most important part of this is understanding we are entering a new reality. And I think that's the hardest maybe pill for some people to swallow, is that this new reality really kind of undermines everything they've learned in their entire life. And so the people that are coping and are triggered by this, it's because there's too much cognitive dissonance happening inside their brain that knows that if Bitcoin is reality, then everything else that they've learned and met has to be redone and has to be done under a Bitcoin standard. But it even goes deeper than that. We don't have time to get into this episode, but even the reality of physics itself, right? A lot of physics-based components are based upon continuous time. And this new model of Bitcoin gives us a sneak peek, I think, at the quantum world and how continuous time may not be how our reality actually is woven together. It may be more discreetly woven together. And so that's another topic. But I think the biggest signal is this is a new reality being imposed on the world, a new free market system that is literally bringing about free market capitalism, true free market capitalism, by the way. And it doesn't matter. There's no prejudice, and there's nothing that stops this from entering this realm. And it's just funny to think about that we are truly going to have this new society built upon a infinite game versus a zero-sum game where the people at the top scrape all the winnings off and take it for themselves. And so we've never had a thing like this. So it's hard for our brains to even imagine what that looks like. And that's why I think a lot of people have time with this. But if you really understood how bad things currently are, I don't think you can understand how good things really can be in the future. And that's just really the framework here, is that we are entering a new reality and that it is being imposed on everyone. And you can't escape it. There is no escaping this new reality. And, you know, we're just inching closer to that new reality.
I love how you just framed that in terms of if you don't understand how bad things have been, you can't understand how good they're gonna be or they can be. I totally agree with that, man. Like it's it is funny. Like we're like optimist maxis. But like people think of you as being like extremely combative and ruthless and everything. But it's kind of funny because it's like you're ruthless about being an optimist and saying like, listen, motherfuckers, things are going to be really good. But man, that clip, there are so many things there. I mean, I am a believer in like kind of intuition and looking at what is the demeanor, even the demeanor of Papparo there. He's like smirking, you know, the congressman or whoever was talking to him was kind of like, oh, I got to look into that answer and what you were saying there. I'm like, all right, you know, give him an attaboy there where he's like, I understand that I don't understand what you're talking about, but you seem to understand what you're talking about. And I totally keyed in on that as well when you mentioned, he did say it twice, reality. And by the way, in my article, I'm genuinely not trying to toot my own horn. It's more just it's a confidence booster when you think about things and come to the same conclusions as the people who probably know way more about this stuff, right? Independently. And in that article I referenced earlier that I wrote called The Bridge, I wrote about Bitcoin in terms of time. And specifically, the word I use over and over in that article is reality, is that we've never had reality-based money. We've never had real anything. And you could argue that for something that, ironically, you deal with Bitcoin FUD for a decade or for years. And the funniest argument against Bitcoin from people that don't understand it is like, oh, it's not real. When the maxis are basically saying it's arguably the only thing that is real that we can verify, and now you've got 4-star Indo-Pacific commanders unprompted in that framing saying Bitcoin is reality. Bitcoin is reality. And again, if you're a normie watching that, you can think he's saying, hey, Bitcoin's not going anywhere, but it feels like he's saying Bitcoin is reality. And man, like it's also interesting that he doesn't mention money at all. And in all those clips that you've been posting for the last week and a half from Papparo's testimony there, man, money is the last thing on his mind. He is talking about Bitcoin as a network. And as he says there, your favorite terminology, power projection, just came out of an admiral's mouth, a 4-star admiral's mouth, in an official proceeding, unprompted in the context of Bitcoin. Like, how did the admiral decide he wanted to describe Bitcoin to the government? Power projection. I don't know. It's almost surreal with all the stuff you've been talking about.
Well, it's kind of like a Q proof. I hate to toot my own horn too, but it's kind of like a Q proof for some of my research. Like, GMoney's been talking about this for years now, and here we have a 4-star admiral, you know, coming out and actually saying it to Congress. It's wild, but it's just part of the acceleration that the foot will not be kept off the gas pedal. Just like Michael Saylor releasing all these products to target the fixed income market, we are now targeting military applications. And so look, guys, your window to adopt this technology is shrinking every time one of these things and events happens, because more and more people, right, that have a lot more wealth and power than you do are starting to connect these dots. Okay. And so it is imperative that you do, right, put this as a priority. And like, think about that. Like, what is more important than your human energy that you produce as a human that is scarce and limited? Like nothing, right? Like that is the ultimate essence of a human. And if you can't take the time to respect your own self in your efforts to produce energy and to then encapsulate that into something that is protected, well, then, like, again, life is tougher if you're stupid, man.
Well, you know, that actually brings me back to the bridge point that we're talking about too in this transition, and why maybe Trump and quote unquote patriots, if this is part of a patriot plan, if Bitcoin is a big part of the plan for the future, of why they've talked about it and handled it with care. Because to your point, it's not, I don't think it's just, oh, these things are on a predetermined timeline. It's the point you just made. If the bad guys connect what's really going on here, they don't take over the Bitcoin network, but they do front run all of you. They front run all of us. And a lot of them have been actively fighting against the Bitcoin network, not adopting it. But as soon as, to your point, as soon as that switch flips in their minds, we can't stop this thing, they're going to adopt it. And as they adopt it, you know, I don't think you missed the train. I think, you know, we've talked about this before. Like, I do think it's going to make the world better for everybody. But I think, so I frame it less as you're going to miss the train, and more like you can get on it very, very early still and front run the transition. Otherwise, you're going to be in the transition anyway. There's a couple little clips I want to play here. This is from Hegseth. I think you sent this. Well, I saw this on your feed. So again, not just Papparo here talking about NatSec. We've got another one.
Do you share the opinion that Bitcoin is a tool to project power? And are there any department-wide initiatives to ensure the U.S. secures a strategic advantage in Bitcoin and combats China's digital authoritarianism?
I guess my short answer would be yes and yes. Long an enthusiast of Bitcoin and crypto potential, and a lot of the things we're doing, enabling it or defeating it, are classified efforts that are ongoing inside our department, which I do provide us a lot of leverage in a lot of different scenarios.
So Pete Hegseth agrees that it is a power projection tool and that what they're doing with it is classified. So, right, there's that. And then you mentioned as well this clip, so I'll tee up here.
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
before you say that, there's another clip of Hegseth, by the way, to where he says, whether we are enabling it or defeating it, that's classified. And so he said, wait a minute. You said enabling the Bitcoin network, right? He said defeating it, but he also said enabling it. And so it's pretty funny that in the background, he's like, well, maybe we're enabling it. Maybe we're trying to defeat it. Maybe you should go learn about it and decide yourself.
Right. Yeah. And then you spoke about, you were talking about Eric Trump, and you were in Vegas this past weekend, right? I think it was this past
weekend. Yeah, I took this video. Yeah, so I took this video.
Okay.
I was a speaker.
This is from you. So this is from me. This is part of that conversation between Natalie Burnell and Eric Trump.
Security, strategic asset.
Listen.
Security, strategic asset.
Listen, we have to have the greatest monetary system in the world. That is national security. When you look at every country in the world, name a currency that anybody, I asked the big group in there, the thousands of people that we had in the other room, would anybody in here want to buy any other currency other than the US dollar? Meaning if you weren't buying Bitcoin first and foremost, but would any, everybody wants to be on the dollar. Everybody wants to have the backing of the United States of America, because guys, we are the greatest country with the greatest economy in the world. What creates our power? Aside from a great system, aside from democracy and other things but it's like we have the greatest, safest, best financial system in the world. Not to say that we don't have flaws, because I could sit here and I can go on about the flaws for hours, but we are hands down by far better than anybody. And that's what gives our country such power. It's what makes us the economic powerhouse. You look at our country, we're a $33 trillion economy and going up fast. We've outpaced Europe over the last 15 years by double digits, by 2x. I mean, we've grown 2x faster than Europe has. If you look at our $33 trillion, what's China as an economy? It's about $22.5, $23 trillion economy. And we have what? One-fifth, one-sixth the amount of people. No one competes with the economic powerhouse of the United States of America. And so we better win. And so is Bitcoin national security? Of course it is. What's better than investing in an asset that historically over the last 10 years has grown at 70% average year over year for the last decade? You ever want to talk about getting out of national debt? That's your way to do it. Aside from growth, that's your way to do it. That's a great way to plug that problem, right? So that's national security. Your deficit is national security. If you have less debt, you can spend more on education. You can spend more on your military. You can spend more making sure that we remain the superpower of the world. And so having cryptocurrency dominance, having Bitcoin dominance, controlling the mining, controlling the ecosystem, supporting the ecosystem, safeguarding the ecosystem, congratulations, that is national security, not to mention all the other attributes that the crypto sphere can provide to, obviously, the Pentagon and to generals and to a lot of other things. Guys, we are bringing into this country, aside from just Bitcoin, if you want to look at stablecoin, we are bringing in literally almost trillions of dollars a year into fixed income, right, and into securities that we would have never otherwise been able to bring into this country, because you have people sitting in distant lands that want to own something backed by America. And that's a beautiful thing for this country, that's a beautiful thing for this economy, and that's a beautiful thing for national security.
So what did you take away from that while you were there?
Yeah, look, I mean, as soon as I heard the question, I knew I had to get this entire clip because you talked about the strategic reserve and all this other stuff. But it goes more to the point of, the Trump's legacy is the transition from this old fiat exploitation system of theft and slavery to a new future of freedom, abundance, and sovereignty. And, the meme coins and stuff are just part of the culture war to get everybody on board. And so, I see big pillars of the architecture being built, and people are like, nitpicking at the color of the drapes, or, some things that's not done yet. And so it's just, look, it's an amazing time to be alive. And, I'm not dooming where I say, you better get on board. I'm saying your window of opportunity to really provide a future for your family, to take advantage of this, is diminishing in the fact that you need to adopt this technology, and you need to adopt it fast. Like, no one is coming to save you. The prices of everything are going to continually rise up. The power structures that be are going to continually try and exploit you through every system they have. There is only one true way for an individual to take their power back. And so, yeah, I am sounding the alarm. I've been sounding the alarm for years now. But the fact remains that these new developments cause a huge shift to the global power structure, a shot across the bow in a warning going, this is being implemented, whether you like it or not. You better get on board because it's happening. And so, I think Trump and them are going to try to slow it down, right? Because it can't get adopted too quickly, or, a lot of us are going to be hunted down and, shot. But at the same time, like, it is on you, the individual, to do this. And you're going to be protected through derivatives like MSTR, right, through getting access to the S&P 500. But, really the ultimate weaponization of this tool is self-custody, and that you've never had an asset like this before, and that you should probably look into it more.
Yeah, well said. By the way, during this show, Bitcoin has crossed $80,000 for the first time since, I believe, January 30th. So I think they're giving us a little hat tip there. I'm sure we're the ones moving the market. Everybody in chat has clearly been loading up on sats. But you just teed up. I'm going to let you go in a few minutes. But you teed up another Papparo clip that I was going to start with, because you just talked about self-custody and sovereignty, right? And I thought this line of questioning or answering from Papparo was a little bit of a deeper cut, and kind of references some of the ways you've been talking about Bitcoin when it comes to the network itself and specifically the sovereignty aspect of it.
Admiral Papparo, yesterday you testified that Bitcoin held potential as a tool for national security. Recent research from the Bitcoin Policy Institute estimates China has approximately 194,000 Bitcoins, while the United States has approximately 328,000 Bitcoins. In this era of digital competition, Would it be to our strategic advantage to maintain a lead in this regard as we do with other strategic resources like gold and oil?
Sir, our interest in Bitcoin is as a tool of cryptography, a blockchain, and reusable proof of work as an additional tool to secure networks and to project power. And so I think this protocol is here to stay. I think the computer science of it has direct implications for the projection of power, not financial, but from a computer science standpoint, from the securing of networks. And so I am supportive of those applications. All instruments of national power are important, but from the military application standpoint, my interest in Bitcoin is as a computer science tool as projection of power.
I appreciate that.
Well, we're going to get into the second half of his answer, but man, that first half is its own thing. But what do you think of that? I mean,
I don't think I've heard that one yet. So it's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
And I love how he keeps weaving in the computer science aspect of it, because that throws everybody off. Oh, he's talking about just computer science, and it doesn't really mean anything, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. So yeah, and let's not forget, Jason Laurie works directly for this Admiral. Okay, so he was given a gag order for writing the book Software. And by the way, you can go download Software for free. It's at 1776.love. You can go download it for free and read it, because if you go try to buy it, I think it's like $300 to $500 right now, because again, they pulled the gag order, they pulled the book from the shelves, and the only ones that have it out there are the ones that already bought it. So
and to summarize, and you've been using the terminology software for years, and I know that you've spoken to Lowry, and obviously that was very influential for me, of you orange pilling me. It's a complex theory, but at its heart, I mean all the details of it, but at its heart, it is very simple what Lowry's laying out. And for anybody who's unaware of that, the software thesis by Jason Lowry, essentially, I guess the easiest way to put it would be, Lowry was saying years ago, Bitcoin is a weapons network. It can be a weapons network. It is a tool for power projection and for national defense. And whichever countries figure that out are going to kick off this global game theory. And to G's point, it's kind of one of those Streisand effect things where it was the U.S. military who gag ordered him, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And am I also remembering correctly that Jason Lowry was involved with Michael Saylor and MIT, or is that?
It's still a rumor. We don't know.
Okay.
So yeah, we don't know have any confirmation of that, but there is.
But he was an MIT guy, right?
He was at MIT, and there is a possibility of a connection between Saylor and Major Lowry. Yes.
So those are the fun rabbit holes. But you've got Papparo here.
I cannot confirm or deny, Burning Bright. Cannot confirm or deny.
Yeah. The other thing that's funny about that clip is that I didn't even remember that Papparo did that. But he says he not only does not talk about finance, but when he does talk about it, he specifically says, we are not interested in it from a financial perspective. We're specifically interested in its capabilities for national security and power projection.
Yeah, and so it's about protecting networks. It's about the coming age of AI that will be able to basically crack any type of encoded software. And that, at the end of the day, since we've never had free market capitalism, and we're moving to a free market capitalism system for the entire world, in this infinite game, okay, everybody benefits from the advances in technology. Okay, and so someone in China producing energy at a cheaper cost and producing new goods, right, will actually make your Bitcoin stack worth more. And so when you game theory all this stuff out and you incentivize the monetization of money so that people find the cheapest access to power on the planet, this is where you get to Kardashev level 1, Kardashev level 2, where Elon talks about. This is where you have Starship. This is where you have General Quast making stuff in space. And so this entire space ecosystem and this entire new abundance model is going to provide access to everybody to live in abundance, and that every new technological advancement will actually empower the individual human. Okay. And so this is big, like utopian type, massive shifts to our consciousness. But this is the level of scale we're talking about. And that's why I think people don't, again, think big enough into what's happening, because they all have this old world, notion that, it's always, the same cat and mouse game. We always end up losing. And, Things are different this time, you guys, and we actually have proof that it's happening this time. And these are Q proofs in real time that are happening at a rapid pace now.
Yeah, and I'm going to finish up this clip of Papparo and get your thoughts on it, because I think, to sum up things, it starts to bring us to why, most of this episode tonight, we've been talking about the big scale and the global economic reordering and this big transition you're talking about. But ultimately, it's the beautiful paradox that drew me to Bitcoin, and when you were talking about it, is that it's really about the individual, is how we get to that world, right? And I thought it was, he might not say that directly, but he says something that I thought was pretty
I don't think I've heard this clip, funny enough, so
okay.
Interesting.
Dad, I agree with you, and I'd also like to hear your thoughts on monetary competition over the coming decades. What role does Bitcoin play in spreading digital property rights?
Well, people use Bitcoin today, right now, to protect their own intellectual property. And that's the reusable proof of work protocol that's combined with blockchain for accountability and cryptography for security. And so that's the role that I see for it. I see direct national security implications, and then I'm supportive for anything that maintains our own dollar dominance worldwide.
I appreciate that. Do you think we're adequately prepared to counter China's strategic direction regarding digital assets?
I think that our recent act with the Genius Act is a great step forward that moves us in that direction.
And lastly, I'll ask you, as we continue to craft the NDAA, what authorities and resources does INDOPACOM need to address as respects the national security dimensions of digital assets?
Presently, we're in experimentation, so I'll give you a deeper look into that. Presently, we have a node on the Bitcoin network right now. We're not mining Bitcoin. We're using it to monitor, and we're doing a number of operational tests to secure and protect networks using the Bitcoin protocol.
I appreciate that, Admiral. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
So I don't know. There's a few things there. He's talking, for anybody who's not aware, this goes back to something G said a little while ago. And I know this stuff is like a different language. It is a different language, but it will start to just seep in the more you talk about it. These are ultimately first principles. When Papparo is talking about running a node, and when G earlier said, having a large amount of Bitcoin does not give you more authority over the Bitcoin network. Does it give you more power? Yeah. It gives you more power projection, right? If you have more wealth, if you have more Bitcoin, you are more powerful. That is the way of things. But you can't, it's not like a bank where being an issuer of the currency or having more of the currency gives you control over the currency. And Papparo there, I thought it was interesting. He says, we're not mining Bitcoin, but we are running a node. And that is something that an 11-year-old in their basement can run a Bitcoin node. And just for anybody who's not really aware of what that is, the way the Bitcoin decentralization protocol works is that as long as one node is active, as long as one person, one computer, offline or online, is running the Bitcoin software, the Bitcoin protocol as a node, they are a node in a network. And as long as one node exists, the Bitcoin network in its entirety and every transaction that has ever or will ever occur is encoded into that node. So, Bitcoin maxis know this, but it's crazy to hear, an Admiral there talking about, and again, unprompted in that direction, says we're running a node on the Bitcoin network. So the kind of cool double meaning I took from that is you're not going to get the Bitcoin network. Like, no matter what happens, even if you were able to round up every single Bitcoin node, the last one is ours, motherfucker. Like, the U.S. military is running a node. That's kind of how I took it.
Yeah, and again, it's the U.S. military is going to impose this new reality on the world, whether you like it or not, that at the end of the day actually reduces some of our power in the financial area to provide equal access to proof of work, i.e., right, actual work, right, effort, into countries to free themselves from the shackles of fiat bankers, and that's really what's happening. Countries that are pulling, all these natural minerals out of the ground and trading them for pieces of paper can free themselves through, possibly doing something else to provide more for their own country. And so that's really what this is about.
So as I let you go, how are you feeling in terms of, obviously in 2025, Bitcoin it ran hot. No, 2024, it ran really hot. And then into 2025, we hit the all-time highs, like 125. Trump came in as the Bitcoin president. But in the meantime, there's been all this chaos and global destabilization and everything. And Bitcoin's riding that wave along with everything else. And I know Maxi World has been a little spooked by it. But how are you feeling as like the one guy who has a foot in both Maxi worlds, like Q and Truther and Trump Maxi and Bitcoin Maxi? Are you feeling better than ever or just annoyed at both paradigms?
I mean, it's honestly a curse at this point, but it's fun, right? Like I get to see the world kind of transpire. But I think a crisis is coming. There's $1 trillion in derivatives. There are $1 trillion in unpaid liabilities and unpaid claims for the future. And this financial system, I think, is going to have a crisis. And who better to navigate the waves of a rocky, turbulent crisis than, of course, none other than Donald J. Trump. And, a president can do extraordinary things, burning bright in a crisis. And I think we're going to have a repeat of possibly the 2008, 2009 debacle, coupled with, some kind of energy shortage or spike in prices. And, I think this is going to break the global petrodollar, bankers cartel that has been enslaving us through the system. I don't know when it's going to happen. But I can tell you that the only true exit in that failed system that we may have a few days of chaos, who knows, will be Bitcoin. And that the people that can actually own and hold and verify their own stack are going to be looking pretty smart. And so think of Bitcoin as an insurance, right? An insurance against what if the system kind of crashes, right? Can you verify your bank is holding all the IOUs it says it can provide? Maybe not. Go watch, what's that movie where they're all, A Beautiful Life.
Yeah,
right?
It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Wonderful Life. Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens, and that there may be a repeat of that. I don't know, but I think it is imperative for the individual to free themselves through technology. And now, we've been given the choice to do that, and we've been backed up by now the United States military to help enforce our property rights in the digital realm.
I like how you frame it too, where if we do have a crisis, it's like we've got, you can respond. If you're the commander in chief, you can respond to a crisis in certain ways. And you've got, I think you might be onto something there where you've got Eric Trump, you've got Admiral Papparo, you've got Michael Saylor, you've got all these guys orbiting, you got Pete Hegseth, and they're talking about Bitcoin through the lens of national security publicly for the first time. And then to your point, and to the point that you recorded from Eric Trump, if you have a financial crisis, you bet your ass that's national security. So hopefully we've got some weapons or technology that we could use to stabilize ourselves in the event of a crisis. And what goes back to the beginning of the show, I think the great and beautiful irony and paradox of all of this is that I think that Donald Trump and Scott Bessent and the U.S. military are provoking the very crisis that they're going to save us from, right? And that's why I think it is so tough right now for Trump, like reputationally, to navigate this stuff, because he's got to take the slings and arrows. He's like, he's got to kick off the very crisis that we need in order to take down this system.
No, 1,000%. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. What do you got going on? Where can people find you? What are you doing?
Not much. Again, Rug Pull Radio. And guys, I've kind of moved to like one show a month. I've just kind of been burned out a little bit, to be honest with you. Yeah. And when things maybe pick up again, I'll probably maybe go back to once a week, but I'll probably, release one show a month. And, we'll just kind of see where things go from there. I just got back from the Bitcoin conference. It was amazing. Lots of energy, not as many people, about half the amount of people. A lot of new frogs showing up with digital 1776. Some of the Bitcoin maxis are starting to realize you can't really vote your way out of this. Maybe Bitcoin is more of the software thesis with the Admirals and stuff coming out. And so, we're in interesting times. I think it's exciting now. I'm excited to see what the next couple of months hold. I think we're going to be well back above into a new all-time high before you know it. And I'm just excited to be here, and I'm part of this ride with you guys. To help wake up as many people as possible, because it's going to take a lot of us to to win this, and together we can easily win this. And the tables really turn when we stop complying to laws that are just unbound from the natural world.
Yep, and another one, it's interesting in those clips, Saylor talking about natural law and Bitcoin and everything. Stuff's all connected. John Drake is the natural law guy at Badlands, and he's into Bitcoin now. And yeah, you've orange pilled a lot of people. I do not think that future Burning Bright will be upset that you orange pilled me. So that's what I'm sticking with, and I don't think you will be upset that you orange pilled yourself.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah.
But
all right, man.
Look, awesome. Thanks for having me, bro.
Thanks for joining the show, dude. We'll do it again.
Shadalay.
All right, GMoney. Always good to have him on. Yeah, it's funny. It's weird. There's people that can say like, oh, you think not everything can come back to Bitcoin, but it's like, well, forget the word Bitcoin. Think about, if you go down truther rabbit holes, for most of us, it usually begins by understanding. You go deep down the rabbit hole, any rabbit hole you go to, any entry point into the conspiracy world or the truth community, whether you took like JFK assassination rabbit hole, 9/11, Vietnam, I mean, pick your rabbit hole. The world wars, for God's sakes, if you go back to that time. There's the infamous quote, all wars are bankers' wars, right? Most people in this audience and that find their way into the truth community, the Q drops reference these things. They know that the banks, the money changers, Jesus had an inkling that maybe the bankers were a bit of a problem. They had maybe gotten a little too big for their britches, a little too big for their sandals back in the day. And those rat fucks always seem to do that, right? So for people that are like, man, I mean, I don't exclusively talk about Bitcoin, of course, but I do talk about it with some frequency. I think about it a lot. I think about it every day. And it's not just because I think a number going to go up. I think system going to go down, and system needs to go down. So part of what I've been so fascinated with and named this episode American Power is because I think Donald Trump's power paradigm, ironically, he's playing, this sort of harkens back to the conversation Ghost and I had last week about the New World Order and Donald Trump's heel turn. I think Donald Trump is basically playing the villain that we need in the current story arc. He is seemingly on the surface navigating us into geopolitical crisis after crisis that he is provoking. One of the great ironies right now is that some of the mainstream media and even lefty anti-Trump talking points and libertarian talking points against Donald Trump recently, in their own little paradigm, makes sense, where they're asking the right questions. Like, hey, Donnie, if you're so mad about the energy crisis that's being provoked in the Strait of Hormuz, why did you do that? And I know Trump has his statements, but I think that there's a good reason that Trump isn't giving the direct answer, because I don't think he's going to get up on a podium and say, yeah, I'm actually trying to dismantle and destroy the leverage of the petrodollar, which is the US dollar, and release the international world from the bondage of the US dollar and the central banking apparatus. And the transition out of that is going to be a series of geopolitical and, as G said, economic and financial shocks that I'm provoking as president and commander-in-chief. And I think Scott Bessent is basically the engineer of this. Not the whole thing, but I think he's played a key role here. I don't think they're figuring this out as they go. And I think we are being guided into the path of the torpedo before it can fully arm itself, but things are going to be turbulent. And they're turbulent right now. Everybody feels it. We know you guys feel it. We definitely feel it. Culturally, it's turbulent. Media-wise, it's turbulent. But financially is the big thing. It's turbulent right now for a lot of Americans. It's freaking tough. I mean, just filling up our family car today, it cost me over $50. And 3 months ago, it cost me 30, 35. So, of course, these things add up. That gets into everything. But as G said toward the end of the show there, it's going to be interesting to see how Trump responds to a crisis that Trump kicked off, that Trump provoked. And before I get out of here, I'm going to get to your messages. I did see a few people use the Rumble wallet during the show to send a tip over. If you guys want to send a rant over, if there's anything you want me to hang out for, go ahead and send that over. I'll get to the boost from last week as well. But we'll do a little Burning Bright corner here. And, I'm going to reference my own writing. That's what I did. That's what you signed up for. 2022. This is, if there's one article that sums up what I think the plan is, it's this one. October 2022, The Good Reset, Exploring the Reverse Hegelian Dialectic. And I've talked about this many times, but the idea of the Good Reset wasn't just to be a cute and catchy catchphrase. It was that I believe that Trump and patriots are utilizing the enemy's playbook against them. I don't believe it's just as simple that Trump and the patriots and the Q drops references that they know the enemy's playbook. I think they're using the enemy's playbook. So they're using the problem and reaction components of the Hegelian dialectic, and they're rug pulling their planned solution and installing their own planned solution. And I think this is happening in multiple theaters at once. And I just didn't know how on the money this theory was. And 2026 has been, I've found it absolutely fascinating. From Venezuela, the discombobulator, to Operation Epic Fury and Economic Fury, as Bessent would say. I think these are key markers of the Good Reset. And you bet your ass, a 4-star Admiral, unprompted, talking about Bitcoin as national security and that they're running a node in the midst of a global economic crisis that Donald Trump provoked, and Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary, the guy ostensibly managing the U.S. financial system and the vision for that system in the future, came into the administration talking about wanting to be part of a global economic reordering. And then we just so happen to go to war with Iran, supposedly, right? This is a reset, but I think it is rug pulling the reset they had planned. If anybody also, I intended this article as this was basically my thought process of my orange pilling. And my orange pilling with Bitcoin was not number go up. It was a conversation with G, but there have been many conversations in 2022 and 2023 where G tried to get me into Bitcoin. And I was interested in it, but we had one where he referenced the temporal element of Bitcoin. He referenced that another word for the blockchain is the time chain. This is one of the things that brought me to Jack Mallers, who is runs a Bitcoin company, works with the Lutniks, Bitcoin maxi, a few years younger than me. I think he's like 30, 31. He talks about a time chain all the time. Bitcoin blocks are mined every 10 minutes. The Bitcoin blockchain is a time chain, is a recorded time ledger. That's what the ledger is that you guys hear G talk about. When I started thinking about Bitcoin as codified time, literally codified time, is when it all clicked for me. Now, did it click in a psychotic, autistic, fifth dimensional way? Yes. But this article was written in December of 2023. I named it the Timeline War. The first entry is called The Bridge. And this whole thing was about combining the Trump's connections with the Teslas, with Nikola Tesla, to Elon Musk, the disclosure technologies and autonomy of Tesla and SpaceX, XAI, and all of that orbiting the Bitcoin network, time codification. And it's funny because Papparo there said Bitcoin is reality. And when I'm talking about codified time, my theory or my framing of Bitcoin and the future in 2023 was all about reality projection. I reference our boy Chris Paul here. There's a false paradigm, a set paradigm that is the false reality. And I started talking about what is the biggest weapon of the system of systems then? Energy. And not in the form of the stuff that powers everything from our toasters to whatever's sitting on our driveways, or perhaps eventually hovering over our roofs, but rather the energy of life, the energy of reality, time, power, rather the taking of each from us. And I said, despite the Prussian public school system having done its damnedest and its job in convincing generations of American youth that mathematics is less an expression of God's sheet music of creation and more a Hegelian torture chamber of wheel spinning and complexity for its own sake, math is a big deal because, put simply, it works more than anything else in reality, as it is reality. Math is perfect. Math is real. Math is. This expression of fundamental and foundational reality is sense-making made observable and logic incarnate. It is, in other words, magic, an infinite power capable of rendering something expressible and finite. And if I were to describe what Bitcoin is, or rather what it could be, it's that, an infinitely powerful potential built out of an expression of the finite, a perfect paradox, not unlike Anons and the truth community itself, which I have long described as a decentralized collective. If there's anything the false reality they have erected has been missing, it's not just scarcity, but reality, solidity, logic. This is both the starting point and the ending point on which to peg valuation, which is to say meaning that can be transferred in the form of trust from one person to another, one society to another, and even one time to another. That is the true meaning and the true decentralized power of peer-to-peer once you get past the sometimes overwhelming technicalities of it all. So if you guys want to dive deeper down that rabbit hole, I highly recommend. I've written a lot of stuff, right? I've written the Righteous Russia series. I write stuff every week. I have to get it out of my head. My wife knows this. I definitely have mental illness when it comes to this stuff. So my subscribers know that the show notes don't just go into the writing. The writing really goes into everything. And the Timeline War, among everything I've written, is my favorite series that I've written. It's not done yet either, but this is this series, to me, this is my mapping of where I think the future is going. And I think it resembles the past that they stole from us way more than people believe. This series, I get into not just Bitcoin and time codification. I get into the nuclear energy renaissance, which I called in 2024. Wasn't the only one, but certainly in the context of the plan. I even said we were going to revive 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, and Chernobyl. And the Chernobyl was the third one I was waiting for. And by the way, that came across the wire last week, that the State Department is going to help fund the rebuilding of Chernobyl. So something I said in the Timeline War series. And check it out. It's very optimistic. It is an optimistic view of the future. My personal favorite entry in it is Amerigeddon, Fissions and Fusions of Nuclear Nightmares and American Dreams. But the bridge is meant to be multiple meanings. It is meant to provide a bridge of understanding for people that are not into Bitcoin or Tesla or any of that stuff into what I think the plan is with Donald Trump and the Patriots and the Q drops and all of that. I think it's all related, as GMoney does. That's why I called it the bridge. And I also called it the bridge because I think these technologies and these men are the bridge to take us into that future. So check that out. Another one that you guys might want to check out because he's highly relevant right now. This would be a good refresher to take into the next month. I think May is going to be a big month for financial news, economic news, energy news. Check out The Wolf of Main Street, Donald Trump's secret weapon against the puppet masters. That is Scott Bessent. This is all about the history of Scott Bessent, why he was brought into the administration, and what his particular set of skills is all about. And all of this culminates in sort of a coda to the series I've been writing recently, which is an article that came out today. It is 10,000 words long. You will survive. Collapse of the global cartel from Venezuela to Iran. Donald Trump's master plan is coming into focus. And this talks about everything from the sovereign alliance to the global economic reordering. I really try to sum up all the writing I did in my Iran war series, which is 7 parts at this point. The most recent one was the Trump transition, part 7. But this is all about trying to put a bow on all that, trying to connect all the dots. Seriously, Tal? Tal. What are you doing? Come here. Come here. What is your problem? What is your problem? Hey. Hey, Tal. Hey. What are you doing? Evil dog. Evil. Evil wolf. Stop itching yourself. We're doing a show. Nobody's going to take you seriously. Ridiculous. Unprofessional. Anyway, whatever I was talking about. Check out Collapse of the Global Cartel. And before I get to rants and boost and all that kind of stuff, I did want to acknowledge the economic strife that's going on. I've appealed to people that, hey, you can support the Badlands Substack. We do a lot of work over there. You can support us on our individual Substacks besides just supporting the shows. If you can, obviously many people cannot, and that's okay. But I just wanted to thank a lot of you guys because after saying it, a bunch of people did choose to support my Substack financially over the last few weeks. I really appreciate that. You can cancel that stuff at any time, but I do put a lot of time into those, and I write these with the hopes that they kind of stand the test of time. And as I showed tonight, I often reference them. The Wolf of Main Street was a 2025 article. The Bridge is a 2023 article. Amerigeddon's 2024. And I like looking back at those and looking at, okay, where did I miss the mark? And then where did I not miss the mark? Because I think it's about building this foundational layer, these ciphers and these principles that you can really apply to the info war and see if anything you're doing is making any sense, right? See if we're mapping things the right way. I certainly took the challenge seriously from the Q drops and decided to try to build my own maps. And I think that's what we're all doing here, right? And to me personally, building my own map doesn't mean constantly referring back to the drops. I started trying to map out and build ciphers of where do I think the future is going? I believe the drops. I believe Donald Trump that we're going into a golden age. But is there any way we can figure out what it's going to look like, how it's being built, and when it's going to get here? Yeah, there's a lot of info out there that's not in the Q drops, and that Donald Trump isn't going to tell you. You just got to build these ciphers and observe the info war accordingly. So hopefully I provide some value in doing that. All my stuff is free over there. So if you do support it, again, very much appreciate it. Or just share it with some people that need to wake up, even if that person is you. And I will grab some rants here. We have Tanya Bay, 15 Tanya Bay, tipped via the Rumble wallet. Thank you very much, Tanya. Appreciate that. I will guard those sats with my life. ZM Hurt also used the Rumble wallet. Love you guys almost as much as BTC. You should just send over a full coin. It's all going to zero, man. Right? This stuff's all going to zero. So just send me all your sats. Tamarack Flats, always using the Rumble wallet, tipped $5.01 in Bitcoin, which eventually I assume will be $5 million and 1 cent, or 5 million sats. Thank you, Tamarack Flats. Much appreciated. The final demand: would love Trump military to be creating a literal in perpetuity Bitcoin node under the ballroom connected to the military contracted Starlink-esque tech. To quote the movie Serenity, you can't stop the signal. there's some interesting stuff with that ballroom construction. Chris Paul has shown a Substack. He sent me a Substack. I think he's talked about it on some shows of rumors about data center construction and national security. And they're certainly pushing that that national security angle. And I don't know. Now you got admirals talking about Bitcoin and national security. Might want to pay attention. And we do have a few boosts from last week's episode. That was a popular one. The New World Order with Ghost. That little Spurg. He has his moments. You know, sometimes he gets it. Speaking of squirrels finding nuts every now and again, Squirrel 447 sent over $100 to the narrative. Such a great show last week, sharing with someone who jumped on the Candace Nick Fuentes train. I hope she gets back on track. Well, I hope so too. No offense to those figures, but hey, media space is changing. I think some funding has been cut off from some places, and you're seeing some layoffs in some places. That's pretty interesting. We got Shug S. Gale with $100 as well. I'm so glad I caught this one. You two together are fascinating. BB, like you, I didn't watch WWE because it was fake, but my son did growing up. He's 50 now. I'm going to send him this episode and hope he has time to watch it. Gail, thank you, Gail. Thank you, Squirrel. Thank you so much. That's extremely generous. Very much appreciated. When you guys use the boost system, you can obviously do that on replays at any time. I'll get to them next week. And we don't take any cut. Badlands doesn't take any cut of that. The only cut of it is from a payment processing perspective. And then Beta Girl sent over $100 tonight. Caught last week's narrative with BB and Ghost. Great team. The background on Hulk Hogan and the analogies drawn between WWF and our political system were incredible and believable. Grateful to have met you both in Nashville. Love and prayers for your success. It's awesome to meet you two. Awesome to meet you guys. Nashville was very energizing. These carts always are, but there was something about Nashville. Not the place. I actually, truth be told, guys, I didn't really like Nashville, the place. But I loved Gart. And man, I think we've created a really psychotic audience in a really great way. I think we've separated a lot of the wheat from the chaff. There's very few struggle sessions going on now. There's a few people that try to put me in one last week, and I just ignore them because they don't matter to me. But struggle sessions don't work on us. And now we've cultivated this audience where they don't work on you guys either. So we're all just trying to do what we think is right and advance the cause in what way we think it should be advanced. And, you know, a lot of you guys are along for the ride. A lot of first timers came to Nashville. First timers, but people who have been following us for a long time. And that's really cool. We've got a lot of OGs that have been following us. And again, just sending a note here. Again, what's great about that is that, to use Bitcoin terminology, I think the awakening works like that. I call this a decentralized collective. I think we are each a node, and as long as one node remains lit, they can't take the network down. That's how it works. It is a decentralized collective. Cooperative sovereignty is the best form of sovereignty. Force multipliers. That's what the network is. That's what the awakening is. And don't let any gatekeepers tell you otherwise. So that's all I got. I will be back next week, Sunday, May 10th. I believe I will be joined by Ash in America, who is in America most of the time. And we're going to be talking about the actual march to justice. A lot of indictments recently, a lot of rumblings, Supreme Court decisions, some happenings actually happening. So we're going to kind of try to collate a lot of that stuff together and do an episode on it. So look forward to that. Otherwise, you guys can see me on Wednesday night on the Devolution Power Hour. Thursday night, the new time slot for Badlands Story Hour. This week, we are doing The Matrix Reloaded. Speaking of networks, it's not the best of the Matrix movies, but it's going to be a fascinating discussion with Chris Paul. Do your homework. Watch Story Hour Thursday night. Go to burningbright.substack.com. Throw me a sub if you want. Otherwise, read my stuff like the grubby little hoe you are. Just coming in there reading other people's articles just because they're free. No, I'm just kidding. You're allowed to do that. I forgive you. Otherwise, as I always say, in sleep state, just sent over a little tip via the Rumble wallet. So thank you for doing that, Sleep State. As I always say, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly. We'll see you guys next week.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face.